Hey, thank you for joining us. My name is Kent Hovind. I was a high school science teacher for 15 years, and now for over 15 years I've been doing seminars on creation, evolution, and dinosaurs. On this video we're going to talk about what the Bible has to say about health. How do you stay healthy? Of course, health would be, in one definition, the absence of disease or the feeling of well-being. You feel good, okay? Health is really a hard thing to define, but we all know when we've got it, and we don't think about it usually when we've got it. We only think about it when we've lost it. Now let me put this a little bit in perspective here. We're going to teach you some things on this series, how to be healthy, what you can do to take care of your body. But if you live to be 100 and you're extremely healthy and you die and go to hell, it doesn't do any good, okay? Going to heaven is much more important. And if you live to be 100 and you don't ever win anybody to Christ and you're a Christian, you die and go to heaven with no fruit for your life, that's also not a smart use of your time. We recommend you live for the Lord even if you're not healthy. But if you can be healthy and live for the Lord longer and produce more fruit, that of course is better. Let me put a disclaimer here at the beginning. I'm not a doctor, I'm a teacher. My goal in this series is to explain a complex thing like the human body and health in simple terms where the fourth graders can understand it. That's my gift of God, is to be able to explain things simply. Now, I'm not a doctor, I'm not trying to give medical advice, I'm just trying to give you some things to think about, some education on how to be healthy. What does it require for a person to be healthy? I'm going to give you the Hovind philosophy of what is required for good health. The Bible says in Proverbs chapter 3, "My son, forget not my law, but let thine heart keep my commandment. For length of days, long life, and peace shall they add to thee." Those are three things that everybody wants. Length of days. I want to not only have a long day, but I want to get a lot done in every day. The Bible says the desire accomplished is sweet to the soul. It's just sweet to be able to work at the end of the day, say, man, I got something done. And if you're healthy, you'll be able to get more done. The Bible says in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 8, "It shall be health to thy navel." Of course, everybody wants a healthy belly button. That's not what it's talking about. "And marrow to thy bones." Obey God's laws. God gave us all kinds of laws to keep us healthy. In 3 John verse 2, he says, "It shall be, I want you to be in health, even as thy soul prospereth." Some people are doing spiritually just fine, but they're physically not doing very good. And there are four parts to the body, four parts to life, and Jesus talked about this in Luke chapter 2, verse 52, about you have the physical, the mental, the social, and the spiritual. So we're going to talk primarily about the physical side of the body, but if you're mentally or socially, out of balance, this is not wise. Now, I want to start by talking about why is there suffering in the world. There is no question there is an enormous amount of suffering on planet Earth. When you just think about the magnitude of the suffering that this world has seen, it's just heart-rending, People have suffered for so many reasons. I'm going to give you 4 reasons why I think there is suffering on this planet today. Many people contact me and say, why did my grandma have to suffer so bad with this horrible disease? And, or why am I suffering? Why would God allow this to happen? Fair, honest, legitimate question. I'm going to try to give you a fair, honest, legitimate answer. Why is there suffering in the world? In my limited study of this, of 30 or 40 some years, I believe there are 4 reasons why there's sickness and suffering and disease in this world. And there may be more, okay, but these are the 4 that I've identified from Scripture and from common sense. Number 1, there is just simple natural suffering. We'll talk about that in a minute. You're human, you're going to suffer, okay? Life's rough and you die. Get over it. Okay, that's the way it's going to be. Secondly, there's some of it's God's judgment on sin. Now, there are those Christians who say all suffering is God's judgment on sin. I don't believe that for a second, okay? Then there's willful sin. You do something wrong and you're going to suffer for it. You go bang your head on the wall, it's going to hurt. Then there's as a purifying grace, just simply to make you better. Let's talk about these. Natural suffering. The Bible says in Philippians chapter 2, Paul said, "You heard that he had been sick, for indeed he was sick," talking about Epaphroditus. Here's Paul, one of the guys of the great men of God in the Scripture, had to leave one of his helpers sick. It's not always God's will to heal. And I get sick and tired of these, name it, claim it guys, saying, oh, if you're sick, it's because you've disobeyed God, and, it's always God's will for you to be healthy. That simply is a lie, okay? It's not always God's will for you to be healthy. Look at 2 Timothy chapter 4. He said, "Trophimus have I left at Miletum sick." Sometimes you just get sick. You read through Genesis and it says he died. Adam lived 930 years and he died and he died and he died. I mean, that phrase appears all over through Scripture. You're going to die, okay? And so there is a natural suffering in the world where human Adam sinned. You just have to live in a fallen state, in a fallen world, in a fallen body. Get used to it. There's going to be suffering for that. Even Jesus got tired. Mark chapter 4, he was asleep. Here's Jesus, the Son of God, God Himself in the flesh, getting tired. He got thirsty. John chapter 19, hanging on the cross, He said, I thirst. These are just natural pains, I guess, that everybody's going to have. So all suffering is not because of sin. Some of it's just natural. Hey, you're going to get tired when you work too hard. You're going to hurt yourself. You fall off the bike, you're going to skin your knee. It's going to hurt, okay? It's not God's fault. It's not even the devil's fault, okay? Sometimes it's just part of the natural suffering. And if you go back and watch our videotape number 2 of our Creation Seminar series, we talk about what the original creation used to be like. God created a great world. Man's sin has destroyed it. But the original creation, they lived to be over 900. You're not going to live to be 900, okay? We live in a fallen world. We talk about how hyperbaric chambers work and how they would increase health and how the original creation probably had greater air pressure, richer oxygen concentration, better minerals and vitamins in the food because the ground was richer. Today the ground is cursed and it's been totally destroyed by a flood. You can watch our videotape number 2 and get all kinds of information about hyperbarics. The Bible talks in Genesis chapter 2 about God giving man the breath of life. In Job chapter 12, it talks about the breath of all mankind. Psalm chapter 104 talks about God takes away their breath and they die. Breathing, of course, is extremely important to life. You have to get oxygen. If you're breathing bad stuff, you're going to get problems. You're breathing in smoke all the time, you're going to create a problem. There's a natural suffering that happens just because we live in this world. Secondly, some suffering in the world is because of God's judgment on sin. God hates sin. The Bible says in 2 Chronicles chapter 21 that God smote this guy with an incurable disease. And if God gives you an incurable disease, it's incurable. God actually punishes sin. And you may have some suffering in your life because of God's judgment. God may be angry at you for what you've done. Now, I don't think that's a cause of all sin. That was the problem Job's 4 friends had. They thought all suffering was a result of God's judgment. And Job, you're having trouble, you must have sinned. That is simply flawed logic, not true. But sometimes it is true. Thirdly, much suffering, I think actually the majority of suffering on planet Earth is category number 3, willful sin or ignorance. We don't know what to do, okay? The Bible says in Proverbs chapter 23, don't even look at the wine when it is red, when it giveth his color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. This is describing wine when it ferments. Once grape juice turns to alcoholic wine, and you can buy non-alcoholic wine, by the way, once it ferments, the Bible says, don't even look at it, don't touch it. At the last it biteth like a serpent, it stingeth like an adder. Thine eyes shall behold strange women, and thy heart shall utter strange perverse things. Yea, thou shalt be as he that lieth down in the midst of the sea, or as he that lieth upon the top of a mast. They have stricken me, shalt thou say, and I was not sick. They have beaten me, and I felt it not. When shall I awake? I will seek it yet again. This is describing an alcoholic who says, wow, I'm hurt, I don't know how, I didn't feel it, I got beat up when I was drunk, and I'm going to go get drunk again tonight. And if you suffer because of alcoholic abuse, that's your fault, okay? Don't blame God, don't blame me, don't even blame the devil. It's not his fault. That's your fault. Okay, you stuck that stuff in your mouth, and you're gonna suffer for it. It's nobody's fault but your own. Willful sin, deliberate disobedience, or just simple ignorance. I didn't know it was going to hurt me. But ignorance can be dangerous. You can die of ignorance. You know, I didn't know that truck was coming. Okay, well, you're going to get killed anyway. All right. Hosea chapter 4 says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." I think it's very important that we understand what's causing our problems. You just don't know. Even in the book of Luke chapter 8, verse 53. Jesus brought back to life the girl that had died. She was dead. And Jesus walked in and said, "Maid, arise." And her spirit came again, and she arose straightway, and he commanded to give her meat. This girl died of anemia. And Jesus said, give her some meat. Very interesting. Many other versions of the Bible say, give her something to eat. No, Jesus specifically said, give her meat. And I get these people who are vegetarians, and you can be a vegetarian and live just fine, I understand, but it's not necessarily God's will to avoid meat. It's perfectly fine to eat meat. And Jesus commanded to give her meat because she had a deficiency. Many people die of diseases or have serious problems because of their ignorance. I didn't know my body needed that. I didn't know I needed water I didn't know I needed, vitamin A or vitamin C or vitamin E. Well, you can die just the same, okay? See, if your car is deficient on things, if you don't put enough oil in your car and you blow the motor, it's not the car manufacturer's fault. It's not the salesman's fault. It's your fault, okay? Put oil in the car, put transmission fluid in, and put it in the right spot, okay? Don't put oil in where the windshield wiper fluid goes, and don't put windshield wiper fluid in where the gas goes, okay? You got to have the right stuff in the right spot, and you just got to have some knowledge of a vehicle to make it run right, okay? You need some knowledge of the human body to decide, what does this thing need? You need some certain vitamins. There are 16 vitamins, 60 minerals, and 3 oils your body needs a little bit of every day. Now people say, how much gas does my car need? Oh, well, that depends on how you drive it. You're going to race it, or you're going to need a lot of gas. I can't tell you how much vitamin and mineral your body needs. I don't think anybody can. I take a lot of vitamins, I take a lot of minerals, I take the oils, the omega-3 fatty acids, the vitamin E, the lecithin, the fish oil, cod liver oil. I take all those things. Do I need it? I don't know. I feel good most of the time. I work hard all the time. And I'm 51 years old at that's taping. And I live in this body the rest of my life. I intend to. So if you take too much, you get expensive pee. That's about all that happens, okay? So to me, it's cheap. I probably spend $2 a day on vitamins. That's cheap insurance, okay? What would you spend a day on other food that you eat, So the Bible says in Proverbs chapter 20, love not sleep, lest thou come to poverty. Sleep is important, but you can sleep, you don't, because of your sleep, you neglect things that need to be done. The Bible says the soul of the sluggard desireth and hath nothing. He wishes he had things, but he's too lazy to go work for it, okay? The Bible says in Proverbs chapter 6, so shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man. If you don't take care of what you've got, you don't take care of your car, you're going to break it. You don't take care of your body, you're going to break it. Something's going to go wrong. It's nobody's fault but yours. Learn how it works, take care of it, give it what it needs. The Bible says in Proverbs 27, be thou diligent to know the state of thy flocks, and look well to thy herds. Take care of your sheep. If you're a farmer, okay? And if you're gonna race cars, take care of your car. If you're gonna work on computers, take care of your computer. Don't pour Coke into your keyboard, okay? Simple common sense things. Don't pour junk into your body and expect it to run well. It's not going to run well. And I think we put things into our body that are absolutely destructive. Sometimes they're destructive in the short term. Sometimes it takes years to see the results. I happen to be very much against vaccinations. We'll have Dr. Tyler on in a minute, talking about vaccines a little bit, how the danger of vaccines. There are many, many people who are suffering horribly for the rest of their life because of a vaccine they were given as a child. My opinion is, don't vaccinate for any reason, okay? And there's lots of good books on that. This one, A Shot in the Dark, is a good book on that. There's even a National Vaccine Information Center, 800-909-SHOT. There are many things covered on our videotape number 2 about this and the vaccination. So this might be an example of just ignorance. They thought they're doing the right thing, but they ended up doing damage to their body because they actually did the wrong thing. So I know people are going to call me because of this and say, oh, Hovind, you're wrong, vaccines are good. Well, you do whatever you want, okay? But I think if you really study this out, you'll find out the whole vaccine mentality, philosophy is wrong, okay? Fourth reason for suffering and sickness in the world, much of it I think is because of some of it can be just because of a purifying grace. God just wants to make you better. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, the Bible says, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, that it might depart from me. Lord, take it away. And he said, my grace is sufficient for thee. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Here Paul had a thorn in the flesh to make him better. He said, Lord, would you take away this problem? He probably had poor eyesight. We don't know for sure what it was, but let's assume it was poor eyesight. Maybe because he got stoned to death, and a rock hit him in the head. Who knows? But Paul said, Lord, would you take this thorn in the flesh, take this physical suffering away? And God said, no. I want you to have it the rest of your life. You may have some suffering in your life, and it's not because of anything you did. It's not because of something your parents did. It's not because something the devil did. God may have given you something or allowed the devil to give you something, a cause, a suffering, a problem, and it's to make you a better Christian. I have back trouble every second of my life, okay? I've had whiplash 3 times. I've been hit from behind. I've prayed 1,000 times, Lord, take it away. I go to the chiropractor, I take lots of vitamins, I exercise, and I live with it, okay? But every second of my life, I have pain in my back. So, okay, I'm going to live with it. It reminds me to pray for those who have pain in the world. It reminds me to think about Jesus Christ and the pain on His back when they beat Him. So it's a constant reminder of what Jesus did for me. And I say, Lord, this is a small cross to bear you've given me. Thank you. I'll just bear it, okay? You may have a cross to bear, some pain in your life that you got to put up with, and just say, Lord, thank you. Make me a better Christian because of it. Every time I take a shower, I think about the Jews getting into the concentration camps, and when they thought a shower was going to come on and the gas came out. That's my reminder to pray. You ought to have little things in your life that remind you to pray, and just a reminder. Sometimes suffering can be a reminder. Oh, my back hurts. Oh, Lord, pray for the Christians in China. Lord, they're suffering so bad over there. Or, it can be, use it for God's glory. Okay, there are 4 things I think we need to keep in mind. How to remove or avoid sickness or problems in your life. This is a kind of a philosophy I've come up with that nothing's original with me, okay, but things I look at. There are 4 things I think are essential. Sanitation. The Bible has a lot to say about sanitation laws. Exercise, proper attitude, be cheerful, quit being a grouch, okay, and diet. Let's talk about each of those in order here. Sanitation. The Bible says in Deuteronomy chapter 23, thou shalt have a place also without the camp, away from the campsite, go out of the city, whither thou shalt go forth abroad, and thou shalt have a paddle, that's a shovel, on thy weapon. And it shall be, when thou wilt ease thyself, that's go to the bathroom, have a bowel movement, thou shalt dig therewith, dig a hole, and turn back and cover that which cometh from thee. I don't know of a kind way to say this, but look, sanitation laws started clear back in the book of Deuteronomy. When you go to the bathroom, it ought to be covered up, okay? Sewer disposal, sanitary disposal is extremely important for good health. God told His people, waste products from the human being should be covered. They can decompose underground, no problem. America enjoys a lot of health because of our sanitation laws. Other countries have a lot of serious problems because of their lack of obedience to this simple rule. The whole problem in Europe back in the 1300s, where 1/3 of the entire population died of plagues, bubonic plague, was almost 100% because of disobedience to this simple verse in Deuteronomy. They had open sewers running in the street, which the rats loved, and the fleas on the rats got these plagues and spread them to the people, and 33% of the population died. Meanwhile, in Jewish communities, where they took God's word seriously, the death rate was extremely low. And some people thought this is because the Jews are demon-possessed, or the Jews are causing this problem. The Jews weren't causing the problem. The Jews were obeying God's laws and enjoying the benefit of this lack of suffering. Other people were not obeying God's laws and were suffering for it. So, sanitation laws are very important. In the book of Leviticus chapter 13, God said if you have a disease like you're a leper, cover your lip and cry unclean. Well, obviously, if you cover your lip, cover the upper lip, by the way. Put a covering on his upper lip. That's so you can't breathe on people. Today, of course, it's common sense. We teach our kids when you're 1 year old, 2 years old, cover your mouth when you cough, And I remember my parents yelling at me all the time, when you cough, cover your mouth. I thought, why? I'm trying to cough. What's covering the mouth do? Well, it keeps you from coughing on other people. Leviticus 13:58 says, the garment that has this disease in it, you shall wash it, and then wash it a second time, and it shall be clean. The Bible is so full of sanitary laws. Some of it today we, of course, assume is common sense, but it wasn't common sense back then. And in many cultures, it's still not common sense. Many problems are caused from a simple lack of sanitation. You don't brush your teeth, you're going to have a problem with your teeth, okay? You don't take proper care of your body, you wash the germs off, take a bath once in a while, you're going to have problems. And don't blame God, it's just a lack of common sense sanitation. Leviticus 14 talks about a person is cleansed if he washes his clothes, shaves off all his hair, wash himself in water that he may be clean, and after that he comes into the camp. But he shall tarry abroad out of his tent 7 days. Make sure all the bacteria are dead. God didn't explain about germs to the Jews. He just said, do this, you'll be healthy. And sure enough, they did it, and they were healthy. There are 83 verses in the Bible about washing. Dr. Semmelweis in Vienna years ago, 1845, was horrified because so many people died after giving birth in the hospital. 30% of the women were dying. He discovered the doctors were examining the bodies of those who died. Then they wouldn't wash their hands. They would go in and examine the next expectant mother, and she would catch a disease from the one that just died. 30% died. He ordered all the doctors in his hospital to wash their hands. After you touch a dead body, wash your hands. They fired him from the hospital. He was fired from 3 hospitals in a row. But by the way, when they did that, when he did what he said, death rate dropped to 2%. From 30% to 2%, just by washing their hands after touching a dead body. This was 1845. We're not talking 2,000 years ago We're talking 160 years ago. They were still not obeying God's common sense laws. Today, of course, in modern hospitals, they have real stringent standards of washing their hands. God told them that 3,000 years ago. They just weren't obeying. Secondly, I think exercise is important. We don't get enough exercise. We end up with problems because we're simply lethargic. I travel a lot, I sit at the computer a lot, I stand and preach a lot. I don't get enough exercise. I have to really work at this. When I'm in airports, I'll run up and down the aisle, or run up the escalator. People think, oh, what's the matter with that guy? Well, I'm trying to get some exercise, all right? I don't get enough anymore. And you can cause problems. The Bible says in Genesis chapter 3, God said to Adam, have you eaten of the tree I told you not to eat of? And Adam said, yeah, finally he said, yeah, I did. And God said, cursed is the ground for thy sake. God said, Adam, I'm going to put a curse on the ground. Life's not going to be easy anymore. You're going to have to work for a living. You're going to have to plow the dirt, plant the corn, raise it, cut it, cook it. You're going to have to work, son, for your own good. This is for your sake. That's a fascinating phrase you never hear preached on. I'm going to put this curse for your good. Hard work, exercise is good for you. You'll be healthier because of it. God said, I want you to eat the herb of the field. Genesis chapter 3, verse 18. You're going to have to work hard, but and then eat the vegetables, eat the plants. He told us a lot about diet in Scriptures. We covered that in video number 2 of our seminar series. In 1 Timothy chapter 4, God said, bodily exercise profiteth little, but godliness is profitable unto all things, having promise of the life that now is and of the life that is to come. See, he said godliness is good for this life and the next life, but notice he's pointing out that bodily exercise is profitable for this life. I think if you want to be healthy, you're going to need to get some exercise. Now, I know people that spend all their time working on their body, they work out, they're really healthy, and they don't spend any time working on their mind or their spirit or their social skills. They never win anybody to Christ. They're way out of balance. Cover more on that on videotape number 2. Matthew chapter 26. Jesus came to the disciples and said, sleep on now, take your rest. It's important to rest. Mark chapter 6, he said, come yourselves apart into a desert place and rest a while. And they had no leisure, so much as to eat. So they departed to a desert place by ship privately. Here's the whole world dying and going to hell, and Jesus said, hey, disciples, take a break. Let's go rest. Yeah, but Lord, we got to preach to all these people. No, let's go rest. If you don't come apart, you will come apart. It's very important for Christians to learn, I've got an extremely busy schedule, I understand. But you have to have time when you say, look, I'm taking a break. I'm taking off. You can ask my secretary. I'll say, hey, I'm going to take a 30-minute nap. No calls. Middle of the day, I'm tired, go lay down, 30 minutes. Yeah, but somebody needs help. Tough, okay? Too bad. Tell them to call back. I'm taking a nap. You just have to get that way. If you don't learn to come apart, you will come apart, okay? And you'll be much more productive in the long term if you learn to get rest. Several famous people like George Burns and Bob Hope, I have heard, I can't document this, they lived to be 100 or nearly 100. They had a massage therapist. A personal massage therapist gave them a full-body massage every day, is what I've heard. Stress is extremely hard on the body, of course, and just relax. I've got a couple of friends of mine that have been in massage therapy school, and I'll say, hey, we've got a little table here at the house. I'll say, come on over. About once a month or once every other month, I want a massage. Pay them $30 or whatever they charge. It's just worth it. I just need to relax. Okay? I've been working hard. I've been traveling a lot. I'm stressed out. I'm busy. I want a massage. It's worth $30, okay? I want to stay healthy. I don't have health insurance. Stress, and I think massage therapy is really important. The Bible talks about the whole body fitly joined together in Ephesians chapter 5. It's extremely important, I think, to get chiropractic care. I have gone for years to chiropractors. We have with us here today Dr. Tyler, who's going to tell us about chiropractic care.
All right, my basic philosophy of health and medicine is that you need to make sure you're doing everything according to God's sanitation laws, and then exercise, and then proper attitude, and then proper diet. We've got Dr. Tyler with us here today, all the way from near St. Louis, Missouri. Good to have you here, brother.
Good to be here, brother.
Been friends for years.
A long time.
And we're going to talk about how exercise ties into this. God told Adam in Genesis chapter 3, because you've eaten of this tree, cursed is the ground for thy sake. It's good for you to have to work and keep your body in shape. Your expertise is keeping your body in shape. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about exercise and about chiropractic care? How does this tie into general health and well-being? How long have you been doing this? What got you into it? There's 3 questions.
Well, that's a big question. Okay. I've been a chiropractor for 20 years.
Okay.
The chiropractic principle is basically that structure and function are directly related. And we have a very specific design. The Lord created us a very specific way. Through the course of our life, toiling through this earth, the bumps, the bangs, the strains that we put our body through, the structures of the body, more specifically the structures of the spine, will become misaligned, fixated, no longer participating.
Fixated means stuck in the wrong
stuck
position.
in the wrong position. And as parts of the body become dysfunctional, it puts greater stress and greater strains on the other parts of the body that are continuing to work.
Right.
So therefore, when you're going through your daily activities, instead of that stress or instead of the whole body participating in the workload, okay, you now have other areas that are carrying all the load. When you're exercising, if parts of the body are not working, it's no longer a therapeutic effort. It is now deteriorating some joints and some tissues.
Example I use, you got a door with 3 hinges, the top hinge comes loose. You still keep opening the door.
Opening and closing the door.
All the pressure's on 2 hinges now.
Exactly. And pretty soon, one of those 2 hinges is likely to give out too. And now you have 2 out of 3 hinges not working on the door. Pretty soon, the door stops working altogether. Unfortunately, when the door stops working and your fingers are in the door, you got a real problem. You start irritating, smashing down on the fingers. It's much like that with the door.
But when does this start? I'm 51, I have back trouble, I have whiplash 3 times. But when does back trouble start for most people?
I often play a game called When Was the First Time You Hurt Your Spine? You know, the most common age for the onset of back pain is 25. And 80% of the population will have a severe episode of back pain by the age of 40, resulting in lost time from work.
This is something that happened, though, way earlier in life.
Some research is suggesting that the birthing process is the start of our spinal problems. We've seen studies that show as much as 80% of infants between the ages of 0 and 5 days old are already showing signs of neurological irritation at the base of the skull from the aggressive birthing process.
So as the baby's being born, the doctor's in a hurry, he's got to go play golf, so
yeah.
jerk the kid out of it.
Let alone that the current birthing process practiced here in the United States with women laying on their back is absolutely a horrible idea.
Right.
The process of giving birth laying on your back was started by Henry VIII.
Why is that?
Because he wanted to identify the sex of the baby as rapidly as possible.
He didn't care about the health of the mother.
Didn't care about the health of the mother whatsoever. When the mother is laying on her back, the sacrum is locked in, the pelvis cannot flare properly, it impedes the flaring of the birth canal, so it's a much more difficult delivery for the baby. And yes, then you go and you take the doctor who's in a hurry to get someplace, and I've seen training films where the baby's head has been rotated almost 180 degrees, okay, in the process of assisting the delivery, and they're calling that a normal birthing process.
Twist the baby's head halfway around.
Halfway around, pop out a shoulder, twist the baby around the other way, pop out the other shoulder.
See, the reason this is not, you won't see the problem from that for 20 years.
Absolutely.
But then they forgot what caused it.
Well, and actually, you may see some of the signs of the neurological irritation, but the current, attitude of the healthcare providers is that, well, if the child's got an earache, give them some drugs. Or if the child's got some colic, give them some drugs.
Cover the symptoms.
Cover the symptoms up. And those are the early warnings, the early indications that the child's having neurological irritation.
So then the kid grows, he falls down, falls out of the high chair, bumps his,
just thousands and thousands and thousands of minor bangs and bumps that we incur in the name of just learning to walk and learning to ride our bike. Brothers and sisters jumping on our heads, falling down the steps, the sports we play, the minor car accidents we have. We now know that at 2.5 miles an hour of sudden directional change will tear tissue. It's no longer, it doesn't take a lot of injury, a lot of force to irritate the ligaments that support the structures. 2.5 miles an hour.
So you got the spine, all the bones held in place by these ligaments, and you change it suddenly, something tears.
Something tears.
What's the body do to fix it?
Body heals all tears like that with scar tissue. Scar tissue is a non-functional tissue. I can best describe it as a dry, leathery tether that starts adhering to this flexible joint. And as that scar tissue continues to grow and grow and grow, the joint just becomes more and more less and less functional.
More fixated.
More fixated.
Yep. That's my problem with my third thoracic vertebrae. It's had so much scar tissue around it that.
Unfortunately, brother, by this stage of the game, we've all got a pretty good amount of scar tissue built up. And unfortunately, the bad news is bad backs are always bad.
That's true.
The scar tissue is the patient's to keep. There's not an adjustment, there's not a procedure that's going to remove that scar tissue. But what we can do with our care is keep that scar tissue more pliable, and so that it's not so restricted on the function of the joint. But regretfully, that scar tissue is going to bring that distortion back. And so
you're knocked out of place, the scar tissue heals, and then it's going to tend to hold it out of place.
Yes, it is.
When a vertebrae is out of place, what does that do?
Well, initially it causes a mechanical tractioning upon the nerve root.
Explain that. Tractioning is
a stretching of the nerve root. Okay. The central nervous system, which is contained in the cranium, into the head, and down through the spinal column, is surrounded by the meninges. People have heard of meningitis. Okay, that's an inflammation of the meninges. Okay? There are 3 layers of these tissues, and the inner layer is adhered directly to the nervous system. The outer layer is adhered to the bones. Coming out through those layers are little extensions of that inner layer. So the spinal cord, the nervous tissue, is directly adhered to the structures that protect it. When those structures misalign, it causes an immediate tractioning upon that nerve. What's ever being controlled by that nerve, the function of those cells at the end of that nerve are altered immediately. We now know that a mechanical tractioning of the nerve will result in histamine formation and mast cells formation, that's M-A-S-T, at the end of that nerve. Those cells will go through an inflammatory response.
Give an example. You stretch the nerve that goes to your stomach.
You stretch the nerve that goes to your stomach, and you increase the likelihood you become vulnerable to gastritis. It will alter the amount of acid that your stomach is producing. It runs the potential of altering the motility of the gastric tract.
Meaning what?
Meaning your food won't process through the tube as properly as it should.
So you're now no longer digesting properly.
You're no longer digesting properly.
How many long-term health problems are caused from, you see the problem as gastrointestinal. The person has to have a colostomy or has to have surgery on their stomach or their intestine, whatever, or they're extremely obese. How much of that could be caused from just a spinal misalignment?
A very high percentage of it. I really, potentially all of it.
Yeah.
And that process of taking the antacids, that's where most people start. I got a little heartburn, I'm going to take a Tums. Right. Okay, I got a little bit more heartburn, I'm going to take more.
Take a whole roll.
Take a whole roll. Take a whole roll.
Case, yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, the way the system is designed, it's on what's called a negative feedback loop. And so we have sensors that detect the amount of acid our stomach has in it. And so we artificially lower that acid with the Tums, and so it immediately causes the body to make even more acid.
So Tums do the opposite of what you want to do.
So Tums do the opposite of what you're after. And there is no long-term relief from the acid production.
So somebody has excess stomach acid. Instead of taking Tums, what should they do?
Get a chiropractic adjustment.
Get a chiropractic
adjustment. Get a chiropractic. There are 2 areas of your spine that are directly related to the function of the digestive tract. The very base of the skull has fibers that attach to what's known as the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve provides parasympathetic nerve supply to the tubes. Okay? And then also in between the shoulder blades, the sympathetic nervous system. There is an area of about 5-6 vertebrae in there that have nerves that control the blood flow to the digestive tract, the acidity of the tract, the digestive enzymes that are produced are all controlled by the nervous system coming out, particularly in between the shoulder blades.
But see, if you fixed all these gastrointestinal problems with a chiropractic adjustment, that would put lots of doctors out of work.
Yes, it would. Yes, it would. I know there's a concern right now that we might have a shortage of physicians within the next 20 years. Apparently, less and less people are choosing medicine as a career. Probably because it's not quite as lucrative as it used to be. But we also know that when doctors go on strike, the death rate goes down.
You mentioned the other day to our staff when you were talking about the number of people who are killed by correctly prescribed medicines.
Yes, according to the Journal of the American Medical Association, the 4th to 6th leading cause of death in the United States is correctly prescribed medication.
So wait a minute, somewhere between 4, 5, and 6 as far as leading cause of death.
Leading cause of death.
Is people doing exactly what the doctor said.
Correctly prescribed medications given to the patient, the right dosage, taken by the patient in the right manner.
And they die.
And they die. Somewhere between 100 to 200,000 people a year, depending on the year that you want to study.
And they die from correctly prescribed medicines. What about from incorrectly prescribed?
If you start adding in the incorrectly prescribed, medical malpractice, the hospital-induced infections,
sure.
Okay, medical intervention can be rated as the 3rd to 5th leading cause of death in the United States.
So if you did nothing,
you'd
be probably better off. Now, I'm not anti-doctor. I just think that, and I've mentioned this in my seminar for years, the basic philosophy of modern medicine is founded on evolution, which says your body's nothing but chemicals, let's add more chemicals to fix the problem. Cover the symptom. Oil light comes on your car. Oh, unplug the light. No. Fix the problem.
Fix the problem.
So you got stomach acid. Oh, let's unplug the light. Let's take a Tums. No. Why do you have stomach acid problem? And that's where people aren't getting the connection.
No, they're not. We are symptom driven.
Right.
I
got a headache.
I got a headache. Get rid of the headache.
Right.
The meaning of the headache, the origin of the headache, cause of the headache is just really rarely a concern. So it's just a constant barrage, more drugs.
See, that's how everybody's trained from kindergarten on. I don't feel good today. Oh, here, take this aspirin.
From birth. We're injecting our children in day one with the hepatitis B vaccine. The hepatitis B vaccine was developed for intravenous drug users and prostitutes.
Not many newborns are either of those.
No newborns are either of those.
Okay.
But unfortunately, the intravenous drug users and the prostitutes weren't coming in for the shots. And so they decided, since children were accessible, we'll go ahead and give it to the newborn infants.
Plus, there's money in giving shots.
There's money in giving shots. Yes, I know. Recently, the newest vaccine on the market is the chickenpox vaccine. And state by state now, they're making the chickenpox vaccine a mandatory shot for children to attend public schools. And I know in the state of Ohio, Merck Pharmaceutical, who is the only manufacturer of the Varivax vaccine, will make $7 million a year from the state of Ohio alone.
So all these vaccine company has to do is lobby the Congress of that state to say, hey, make this mandatory. Your kids all need this. And by the way, we supply it. And love of money, root of all evil.
Yes, it is. It is. It really is. It's the pharmaceutical industry spent $2.4 billion last year on direct patient advertising. They spend, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, wooing and wooing all the medical doctors, the regulators, and those sorts of things. The conflict of interest from the CDC and the
Center for Disease
Control, the National Institute of Health, and the FDA. All of those boards of members are made up of former pharmaceutical executives and representatives. They're sitting in on the discussions as to whether or not this drug is safe and should it be licensed.
And since, hey, my company happens to manufacture that drug, of course it is safe,
Matter of fact, in 1972, the FDA ruled that a vaccine no longer has to be proven effective before it will be released. In 1996, they ruled that any drug only required one safety study before it could be eligible for license.
And who's doing that safety study?
That would be the pharmaceutical industry.
Sure, right. We got the fox guard and the chicken coop.
Yes, we do.
All right. You've been in chiropractic 20 years. Why did you choose this over any other career, and what results do you see? Do you see people get better?
The results I see in chiropractic are just amazing. I became a chiropractor because when I was 14 years old, I started seeing a chiropractor for knee pain. I'd already had knee surgery at the age of 12. They wanted to do more knee surgery at the age of 14. So I started seeing a chiropractor on the advice of my brother. As a result of that chiropractic care, my asthma was corrected. And I no longer needed allergy shots.
That was a side effect you didn't
That was the side effect of my chiropractic care. I was no longer asthmatic, and I no longer had the need for allergy shots.
Now, I have, over the years, sent thousands of people with asthma problems to chiropractors.
Mm-hmm.
Many remember to call me back and say, that was the solution. What exactly, we're going off a rabbit trail here, but somebody's got asthma, what's probably really causing it? Instead of taking the shot to get down the asthma symptoms, how do you get rid of it?
Well, what we know is that asthma is a constriction of the bronchial tubes. There is a muscular lining around the bronchial tubes.
It's inside your lungs.
That's inside the lungs. It's the air passage from the lungs to the outside. And the lining of that bronchial tube is smooth muscle. And that muscle is controlled by the nerves that come out of the upper portion of the back.
Right.
But there's also an inflammatory component to bronchial asthma, where the lining, the epithelial lining of the bronchial tubes will become inflamed and swollen. Well, as I mentioned earlier, when you irritate a nerve, it causes an inflammatory response at the tissue that is controlling. Okay, so irritation to the nerve in the upper portion of the back, the upper dorsal spine, can cause both the bronchial constriction and the swelling and inflammation associated with asthma.
So here you got a tube supposed to carry so much air, now it's swelling shut.
The swelling shut or constricting stuff, failing to dilate. A common presentation of asthma is the child who goes out and starts running around a little bit and suddenly is gasping for air. Or they get under a little bit of stress and they start gasping for air, or get in an environmental pollutant, a lot of pollens or dust.
So they spray the stuff in there, which
artificially dilates the tube
Right.
Okay,
and of course the body's thinking, wow, we need to constrict it even more.
That's right. You know, the power of 6. Once again, you're back down to when the nervous system is doing something and you're chemically altering what's taking place, the nervous system just continues to counteract it. That's the reason why it keeps coming back, keeps coming back, keeps coming back.
More asthma gets worse.
That's right. And you know, the sad part of it is that the medical community knows themselves that the prolonged use of the inhalers, the Adderalls, the Ritalins, and those sorts of things, increases your likelihood of dying from asthma. It lessens the bronchoprotective mechanisms that your body has.
Let's suppose someone has asthma, they're 10 years old, mom says, what do I do? You say, bring them to a chiropractor. How many times would it take typically to...
Some patients will notice an immediate change. Just a matter of
one adjustment.
One adjustment, 2 adjustments. If it's a longer standing bronchial condition, now we start playing with the scar tissue. You know, once that scar tissue gets locked in and the nerves become irritated and chronically irritated, and also the tissues on the end of that nerve will literally change because of that nerve irritation. Those longer standing conditions take a little bit longer. But seeing a child in those early years, the results are so much more phenomenal. Right.
What's the youngest child you've ever adjusted?
Youngest child I ever treated was 2 hours old.
2 hours?
2 hours old. I could not begin to list the number of children that received their first adjustment in that first week of life.
Okay.
And just continue on with care. It's the only health care they know. Because
during birth, that's pretty traumatic on both the mother and
the child.
And the father, by the way.
Well, and the father.
I delivered both my kids at home. But if the child during birth, that can cause damage to the spine, which 25 years later shows up as a symptom, and by then they've long forgotten the association.
My friends and I in chiropractic college always used to joke about the fact that the body never forgets the insults. We forget the traumas.
Right.
You know, we forget the number of times we fell down. We forget all the things that we go through. But the body doesn't forget those insults. Now, all those traumas, all those injuries are dealt with scar tissue. And that scar tissue just keeps right on accumulating.
Right. Okay, I keep interrupting you here. You were talking about how you got into this. Now, you had knee surgery at 12, and then you got adjusted at 14 and fixed your asthma.
Yes, it did.
Then what happened?
Well, from 14 until 18, I went through about a dozen other potential careers, you know, like a lot of high school students.
Sure.
Got into college and, you know, just always had a fascination with science, particularly the human body. My mom likes to tell the horrible story, and now I find myself repeating it, but apparently at the age of 5 and 6, I used to sit down with the chicken necks and play with the bones. You know, but once I got into college and started studying the human body a little bit more intensely, I just realized this is where I needed to go. Graduated from chiropractic college in August of 1983, and been treating patients ever since.
Now, after all of your study on the human body, what is your belief in evolution and creation?
Well, evolution is just a silly idea.
You don't think there's any way this body could have happened by chance?
No, because molecules are stupid.
Yes.
You know, and I explain to patients all the time that molecules never contemplate the results of their chemical reactions.
Yeah, the hydrogen and oxygen, they're not thinking what's going to happen. All they know is, hydrogen, I want an oxygen.
That's right. All they're going to do is chemically react with one another. You know, in a laboratory, you can drive in particular ways. We know that it's influenced by temperature and concentration and molecular orientation. Those are the things that drive chemical reactions. Molecules never contemplate the results. Therefore, we did not evolve. 2 molecules did not get together and say, ew, this feels good, let's build something. And the same thing is true in the human body. The molecules are not the secret to our health. They are not the secret to our existence. That is what medicine is based on. If we did evolve, if the molecules were the secret to our life and the secret to our existence, then when our system is not working properly, then the answer would be to add more molecules in until you get just the right mix of molecules.
Right.
Unfortunately, stupid plus stupid still equals stupid.
Right.
It takes intelligence. It takes a directing force to get these molecules and our billions and billions of molecules and trillions of cells, in order to work in a coordinated fashion. If you know, there's a rule of chaos in physical medicine. or the physical world. Okay, things tend to move toward randomness and chaos. I use my son's room as a prime example of that. If he doesn't constantly put effort into his room, then pretty soon it's chaos.
Intelligently directed effort.
Intelligently directed effort.
Yeah, just tossing a hand grenade in it will not.
Will not do the job either. And quite honestly, tossing a hand grenade in is about what medicine is. It's what taking a pill is.
Yeah.
You just don't know what that chemical is going to do in your body. That's the reason why correctly prescribed medications are the 4th to 6th leading cause of death. It's an unpredictable chemical reaction. It requires intelligence to direct the activities of the human body. I tell people that one moment we are alive, and the next moment we are dead, but we have the very same molecules in place.
So what's the difference?
The difference is God's force, God's intelligence. The expression of His intelligence.
The breath of life.
The breath of life. And without that breath of life, the molecules are worthless. They'll just keep doing what molecules do. They decompose.
Yeah.
They chemically combine and react. And that's all they do.
Well, even while we're alive, there's constant decomposing of the molecules.
Yes.
The body is using all this in a...
The body is constantly tearing things down and building things up. Right? Tearing things down and building things up. That is why, nutrition is so important in the world of healthcare. It's also why you have to have a properly functioning nervous system. Because without the properly functioning nervous system, that building up of tissue takes place in a random manner. When I was teaching anatomy and physiology, we used to talk about each cell being a little protein factory.
Right.
Okay, and it's producing a product. It needs a product for itself. It needs to repair itself. And often it's producing a product to ship out into the rest of the community. Well, if it doesn't have the raw materials coming in, and if it doesn't have a supervisor on staff, controlling the activity of the cells, then what the cell makes and what it produces and puts out to the system is a random process.
Right.
So, without the intelligence, without God's intelligence, His breath of life, the molecules will simply start decaying.
All right. Now, you told us yesterday in the staff meeting about, or maybe it was I forget when, but your son is how old? And
my son is 15 years old.
And when did he get his first adjustment?
They got his first adjustment in that first day. And his only experience with the medical community has been because of a broken arm and a gash in his leg that needed to be saved.
So you're in favor of going to doctors for those things?
Oh, obviously there's a time and a place for medical intervention.
Sure.
Giving credit, and I had a discussion with one of your staff members the other day about balancing out the sovereignty of God in healthcare. The medical community is very good at trauma repair.
Sure. Break your leg.
Break your leg, they fix it. As a matter of fact,
don't take a pill.
Don't take a pill.
Go to the doctor.
A matter of fact, I believe that, there's lots of bragging going on right now about our extended life expectancy. I mean, after all, we're up to like 77 years now. But it's not because we're healthier. It's not because, we're actually prolonging, the late ends of life. What we're doing is we're repairing trauma. Statistically, you take a group of a population, and their average life expectancy may be 60. But the reason it's 60 is because when you fell off the horse at 20, you probably died from it. If you got impaled on something at 25 or 30, you probably died from it. Well, what we've been able to do over the last 50 years is we've been able to repair those early traumas. And if you repair those early traumas and don't die from it, well, then you automatically shift the life expectancy up.
Of the average of the population.
The average of the population. Understand that the life expectancy is an average.
Right.
Again, if you don't die young from trauma, then the average shifts up. I live up in Missouri, right next to Daniel Boone's home. And Daniel Boone died at the age of 86. Built his own coffin when he was 82. So it's not like we're living longer. Matter of fact, our statistical likelihood of living past 80 is no greater now than it was almost 100 years ago.
Right.
So what we do is and the medical community, once again, is very good at trauma repair. I tell people, if I get shot, please take me to the hospital. Take me to the emergency room.
Correct.
Have them remove the bullet.
Right.
Sew me back up. But after they're done with that type of intervention, then take me to the chiropractor.
Right.
And let me get adjusted so that my system has the ability to continue the healing process.
Another thing I don't think people understand is because our life expectancy is 75 or 77, really means nothing. I saw my own mother and my own father spend the last 8 years of their life in basically horrible condition, They lived to be 75 or 78, but
where's the quality?
many people die at 60 and they bury them at 75.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're
that's to say, that's
it really is true. The quality of life in the later years right now is horrible.
What about other countries where they, grow their own food, live out in the wild?
I believe right now that the United States, the health of the United States population is ranked like 28th or 29th in the world. There are lots of so-called lesser developing countries who have a healthier population than we do.
Right.
The amount of money we spend on healthcare is greater than any other population. And we certainly are not getting our money worth out of this healthcare system. Certainly, if you live a cleaner lifestyle, if your food source is more natural, then the quality of life goes up.
So they might only live to be 75, but they die gardening, hoeing their garden.
Exactly. As opposed to
sitting in a nursing home.
Sitting in a nursing home.
Right.
Once again, we are zombieing our older populations.
I wonder if there's ever been a statistic created for, instead of like just when you die, making that the marker of when do you lose your vitality of life. America probably rate way down there.
Yeah, we would rate real low, and I don't know that anybody's accumulated those statistics.
That'd be tough to do.
Yes,
still.
It would be. By the age of 40, 80% of the population has experienced a severe episode of back pain that's kept them out of work. By the age of 65, your likelihood of being on 3 lifetime medications, is very high.
Of course, to the pharmaceutical company, this is wonderful.
They love every minute of it. And I know there are some in that community who are well-meaning and caring individuals.
Right.
They're just lost.
I think there are some Buddhist priests that really sincerely want to help their people.
Yes, I'm sure there are.
Now they're leading them astray, but they don't know they're leading them astray.
Exactly. And unfortunately, I think that especially at the higher echelons of the pharmaceutical industry, they know they're leading us astray.
Sure.
They know dog good and well what they're doing. I'm sorry, we've been putting for 20 years, we've been putting thimerosal in our vaccinations. Thimerosal is a mercury compound. Mercury is one of the most toxic substances known to man. Matter of fact, some of the schedules for the vaccination for our infants, for our children, exposes them to 125 times the declared safe level of exposure to mercury. And we just keep right on injecting them right in. And I'm sorry, there was never a need for thimerosal.
Why is it in there?
Preservative. Gives it a longer shelf life.
Oh, so the vaccine doesn't run. That's
right.
Back to money.
Back to money indeed.
Because if they make the vaccine and it's got a 3-week shelf life,
and then,
then they're going to lose money.
Somebody that might end up on the shelf someplace sitting in the warehouse. Of course, a lot of times what they do is they'll then take that product and ship it over to another country, and that's another good sign.
Help them out.
To help them out.
We're here to help you.
For example, finally, 10, 15 years ago, we finally banned the use of the DPT shot. We now do the DTAP, the acellular pertussis shot. We know for a fact that the DPT shot was causing encephalitis. It was causing all sorts of problems. We stopped using it here in the United States. So now they ship it over to Africa.
Help them out. And of course, the African populations are suffering terribly, incredibly high death rates because of a lot of medical intervention.
A lot of the medical intervention. It's a population that is becoming more and more riddled with the AIDS virus, a lot of individuals over there have the AIDS virus as no result of their own, and in that compromised immune system, they're going over there now and doing a lot of polio vaccines and dealing with some polio outbreaks because the immune system is not properly functioning. It's a terrible crime is what it is.
Well, how would you solve, let's say we got an average person watching this video is going to say, hey, I just want to be healthy. What's the order of progression you would tell a person to do? You want to be healthy. If somebody comes to you and says, Doc, I have this problem, what do you recommend in sequence?
I've been explaining to patients that the reflection of our health is, you can almost look at it as a balance sheet. The world's full of negative influences.
Right.
Our diets are questionable, our air is questionable, our stress levels are very high. The amount of traumas and insults we do on our body on a regular basis takes its toll. And those are all negatives on the balance sheet. Really the secret to being healthy is starting to get more and more positives on the balance sheet and eliminating those that you can, the negatives.
Right.
From a very early age, we teach our children to brush their teeth. And we teach them to brush their teeth, not because they have pain, but because we want them to have healthy teeth throughout their life.
If you wait till your teeth hurt to brush them,
you're already in problems.
Real problems.
You definitely have problems. Every day we do bad things for our teeth, so every day we're taught to brush them. And if you don't brush them, they decay faster.
Every day we do bad things for our spinal column. Every day we lift the wrong way. Every day we sleep in compromised positions. We fall asleep sitting up. We fall asleep curled up in a ball. We sit with our head propped up, studying. We fall down the steps. We fall off our bike. We throw ourselves on the ground in the name of a football or a baseball.
Right.
Let alone the car crashes and things like that. Those are all just negative influences. If you just let them sit on the negative side of the balance sheet, pretty soon you're real far behind. Mm-hmm. And so if we start. If the population would start understanding that if you correct those sorts of things early on, you don't have the accumulative effect of all those negatives. Bad diets. If the population would learn to eat better, if they would start taking a reasonable quality multiple vitamin and mineral,
right.
If they'd start understanding the importance of a good sleep pattern, okay, if they start understanding the value of moderate physical activity. We've got so many weekend warriors out there.
Right.
They sit behind a desk, Monday through Friday, okay, and then go out on the weekend and throw themselves on the ground in the name of recreation and then wonder why they hurt on Monday and Tuesday.
Right.
So it really comes down to taking care of the system from the very beginning and maintaining it throughout your lifetime. We do that with our automobiles.
Right.
And you go out and you buy a major appliance, and people buy maintenance agreements, so they go in and get things taken care of on a regular basis, but we don't do that with our own body. We wait until the red light comes on the dash, and then we simply take something that hides the red light. And that's just, it destroys the automobile.
So give us a few case histories of things you've seen. People come to you over the last 20 years, and what type of things have you fixed?
A couple of my favorites. I had a gentleman come in after his third adjustment, and he pulls the treatment note card out of my hand and starts reading it to me. And I said, well, that's really interesting. What's it all about? And he says, well, yesterday I couldn't have read that. I don't have my glasses on. And what we had done during the course of his adjustment was we had improved the circulation up into his head and into his eyes. And he tells the story that after his third adjustment, he was working in his workshop. And he started getting beads of sweat forming on his forehead. So he pulled off his glasses and wiped his brow. And when he wiped his brow, he looked over and happened to notice that he could read the Frito bag. Okay? And he didn't have it. He had his glasses in his hand instead of on his head. This gentleman went around my office that day reading to everybody in the office.
And got his increased circulation.
Increased the circulation.
Wow.
And that's where we have a lot of our effect. 99% of blood flow is controlled by the nerves that come out in between the vertebra and the dorsal spine. They control the diameter of the blood vessels. And if you've got a diminished blood flow into a region of the body, then those cells are deprived of the oxygen they need, the nutrition that they need, and the waste accumulates in the area.
Right.
And when you're living in sewers, pretty soon you don't work so well.
Sure.
And so by increasing the circulation up into his head, we're able to improve this individual's vision.
Well, that's another major factor we can get into for hours, but living in a sewer.
Living in a sewer.
You don't have proper blood flow or oxygen flow. Mm-hmm. Your body builds up toxins. Mm-hmm. What am I going to do with this? Same thing with the colon. I heard that John Wayne, when he died, his colon weighed like 75 pounds or something like that from all the accumulated stuff.
Yeah, the grunge that accumulates
right.
along the colon. And that's a reflection, once again, of our bad diet. Also, neurological irritation. Gastric motility is controlled by the nervous system. That's another one of my favorite stories. This was a young girl who, quite honestly, couldn't have bowel movements. She was having bowel movements every 6 or 7 days. And that was only after aggressive laxative therapy.
Man.
And so the parents finally brought this young child in to me, and we started doing adjustments on her. And what they noticed was the day of the adjustment, she was going home and having a bowel movement. And they were becoming easier and easier and easier. And now she has a regular bowel pattern without the use of the laxatives. And it just simply came down to, I moved the bones. God did the healing. And all we did was take the pressure off the nervous system so that his creation will work the way it was designed to work.
What got me excited about chiropractic, I guess, besides having 3 whiplashes and having to go as a teenager, was when that son right there sitting behind that camera was born, we had severe problems with him as a newborn, spent a fortune on progestin, pre-digested milk. He couldn't digest things. And a guy in our church was a chiropractor and adjusted his back, and just within a very short time, we saw incredible results.
Yeah, you know, the chiropractic profession has a fairly high burnout rate. I mean, a lot of doctors after 15 years kind of get tired of dealing with chronic back pains. That's why I enjoy my pediatric practice so much. You know, when we get these young children in here,
you correct it instead of having to maintain it.
Exactly. We can make real changes, lifetime changes in the structure of their spine and the function of their nervous system. That dry, leathery tether, you know, that scar tissue that forms over years. I mean, once that stuff gets a real strong hold on you, you know, we help. We take pressure off the nerve. We improve the mechanics of the spine. But that scar tissue is the patient's to keep, and that perpetuates the problem, keeps bringing it back.
Which makes them think, well, all chiropractors want is my money because I got to go back every 6 weeks.
Yeah, I know. We deal with that one. You know, once you start going to the chiropractor, you have to go the rest of your life. Well, that's simply not true. We have patients that come in and receive care and derive the benefits from the care, and then they'll go on about their lives for a while. Then they may show up later on because of a flare-up down the road or a new injury or something like that. But I just remind patients that, you know, medical care is a lifetime adventure too.
And take that pill every morning.
Take that pill every morning. I mean, you know, use your inhaler 3 or 4 times a day.
Right.
I mean, so ongoing care, you know, if it's beneficial to the body, should not be a hindrance to people getting care.
Right.
You know, it's just you know, our society is, you know, wants their problems fixed now, and they don't want them ever to return, and we just don't get our way that way.
Well, let me tell you my philosophy, my sequence of events that I go through if I feel sick. First, I check, am I doing something wrong nutritionally? Am I not getting something nutrient? If you don't give your body the stuff to build with, it can't build it.
That's absolutely right.
If I tell you, I want you to build this space shuttle, but I'm not giving you any screws, well, you're going to have a hard time. Okay?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I want you to build this tissue, but I'm not giving you any vitamin A. Well, I'm sorry, I can't build that. Okay.
That's right.
So I check nutrition. Then I check alignment. Is my body working properly? Is something pinched? You know, is there a mechanical problem? Then, am I getting enough sleep and exercise? Lastly, I can't fix it. Okay, go to the doctor. That's my sequence.
And that's a very appropriate sequence. You know, some cultures in the land have a saying that when you start feeling bad, you see the man with the hands, and before you die, you see the man with the drugs and the knife.
Ooh, there you go.
You know, I mean, you know, there's a time and a place for the surgical and medical intervention. You know, but it should be done last. Right. You know, because once you go in and start cutting on the structure, once you go in and start putting known toxins into the human body, okay, you know, you've got to ask yourself, do you feel lucky? The results of the care are very unpredictable.
You die of the cure.
You die of the cure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I got 3 calls yesterday. Brother Hovind, what do you do? What kind of vitamins do you take? How do you stay healthy? I am a far cry from a health expert. Okay, I taught biology and anatomy. Right. I understand it a little bit. In teaching school 15 years, I missed 4 days in 15 years for being sick. I flew 215 times last year. I'm in a different climate, different bed just about every day. Yeah. I preached 800 times, and I have not missed 1 day of preaching in 15 years for being sick. And I'm telling people, that's why I'm asking you to come here. Your type of philosophy of life is what I have tried to follow. It just plain works, okay? I'm 51. I feel pretty good. I get up early and work long days. My staff here says I'm a slave driver. I work everybody hard, and there's a lot to do. We're trying to win a war. Yeah. And I just hate to see Christians on the sideline for illness when they should be in the battle.
Well, you know, Satan doesn't want us well.
Right.
You know, when we're sick, when we're degenerating, when we're disabled, we don't do a very good job of reflecting the glory of God. No. You know, so it interferes with our witness when we're dying and decaying. The take care of your health as you go philosophy is what we really need to do. The principles of waiting until you're diseased and take a pill just isn't working.
If you wait until your car started knocking and then you check the oil, that's not a good way to maintain a car.
No.
Yeah.
And, you know, I often use a lot of analogies. And I also often describe our newborn babies as fine Lexuses. I mean, they're wonderful automobiles. I mean, just balanced and tuned so magnificently. And when you have a new car, there's two ways to destroy it. You can drive it off the cliff and blow it up all at once.
Right.
Okay, most of us don't go that way.
No.
The other way you can destroy your car is to take it to the Walmart and put a little ding in it. Just one little ding. You know, well, listen, if you had a very expensive automobile and somebody came along and hit it with a ball-peen hammer, most people would take that car right to the body shop and they'd get that little ding fixed right away.
Sure.
But we don't do that for ourselves. You know, we fall down and go boom. We get the bangs and the jars and we start getting these symptoms. And instead of taking it in and getting the problem fixed, we're just willing to spray it over a little bit with a little bit of paint and just wait for it to decay and get worse.
Or not even spray it over.
Or not even spray it over.
Let it start to rust.
As long as it's not interfering with what I'm doing right now, they'll ignore it until it gets so bad.
So I see people, they hurt themselves and, you know, they say, it doesn't hurt that bad, I can take an aspirin and I can live with it. Well, yeah, but 10 years from now, you're going to wish you'd fixed that problem.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
What's that game where you stack up all the blocks and you try to pull out blocks in Jumanji or
Yeah, Jenga or something like that. Right.
Your spine's that way, you know. You misalign one and messes up everything.
You know, the human body has 206 bones, and it has over 600 muscles, and they're all connected. It is a giant system of levers and pulleys, and not a bunch of parts working individually on their own.
Right.
And unfortunately, a whole lot of healthcare is rendered through a people. You know, you go into most medical practitioners and tell them that you have a shoulder problem. Well, then the only thing he's going to look at is your shoulder.
Right.
You go into a medical practitioner and you tell him that you're having stomach issues. Well, then the only thing he's going to look at is your stomach. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't look at those parts, but you have to look at the whole system. You have to understand what the system is doing as a whole.
Right.
Because you cannot fix one part with a total disregard to the other, and that's what's happening. You know, people left and right are pulling out their gallbladders. There was a doctor in our small little community that, last I heard, had done like 29 gallbladder removals in 1 month. That's about a gallbladder a day, as if it was an expandable part that they just didn't need anymore. You know, but you know, they don't understand the long-term consequences of pulling out these pieces. 3 out of every 5 spinal surgeries require a second spinal surgery. You know,
wow, 60%.
60%.
And of course, to the guy with the doctor who paying for his Lexus, this is great.
It's a wonderful thing.
Sure.
It certainly is. But the results are not that good. You know, it's just it's a short-sighted healthcare system.
Yeah.
You know.
And see, people don't see the connection between what they did and the result because it's 10 years later, so many times, or 20 years later.
Right. Well, 206 bones, 600 muscles, they're all connected, and they all have a couple of jobs. Ultimately, everything from the head down is responsible for holding up to the head.
Well, the Bible talks about the whole body fitly joined together, you know, and the head controls the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And that's what chiropractic's specialty is.
It was not, Paul used those analogies to describe the workings of the church.
Yeah.
400 years before Christ, it was well established that everything was controlled by the head. That's the reason he used that. He was taking a divine principle and trying to explain it to people so they could understand it. And the way he was able to do that was using the human body, because they knew back then that everything came from the head and came down. Yep. And that spinal manipulation, structural therapy has been utilized for centuries.
So chiropractic's not something new in the last few hundred years?
Absolutely not. You'll find indications of chiropractic and spinal adjustments in ancient civilizations all throughout time.
Yep. All right. What other would you like our folks to know out there on chiropractic?
Oh, my goodness.
I don't want to take 3 days. Give me an example. I have not had any health insurance for 15 years. Mm-hmm. We have decided until I can buy it for all of my staff, mm-hmm. we're not going to buy it for me. Mm-hmm. And I have done fine because now the responsibility is on me.
Right.
I got to live in this body. I've had several medical doctors tell me that they think 70 to 80% of all healthcare costs in America are from self-induced problems. They took drugs, they smoked, they drank alcohol, and now they're sick, and they want me to pay for it. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, if you want to wreck your car, that's fine, but you're going to pay for it. Don't ask me to help pay for your car you drove into a tree.
Yeah, personal responsibility.
Right.
People need to understand that what you do today has consequences tomorrow.
Right. So eat right, sleep right,
eat
exercise.
right, sleep right, take care of yourself. You know, if you wait until the house is on fire before you try to throw a bucket of water on the small flames, it's not going to do you any good.
All right, Dr. Tyler, here you have a model of the human spine. Tell us how it's built, how it works, not the model, but the real spine.
Okay.
And how to maintain, what should the average person do? This is the frame of your car. You know, this is something's wrong here, you got a problem somewhere else.
Absolutely. The way the spine is designed is we have 26 movable segments from the base of our skull down to the tailbone. Okay. 7 of those vertebrae are in your neck.
Called the thoracic,
called the cervical vertebra.
Right.
And then we have 12 vertebrae in the middle with ribs attached to them, called the thoracic spine.
So I tell people, I go to chiropractor, and I've been probably 8,000 times, and I say my T3, third thoracic
vertebra,
is pronated right, twisted to the right.
Twisted to the right.
Which pinches some nerves, which causes...
Irritates nerves, causes a whole host of potential symptoms.
Right.
Okay?
I know them well. Okay.
We have 5 lumbar vertebrae, that's the lower back region. And then we also have the sacrum and the coccyx, commonly referred to as tailbone. Coming out in between the bones of the spine is what's referred to as a nerve root. And each nerve root contains approximately 300,000 nerves. So coming out at the base of the skull, you'll have a nerve root with 300,000 nerves going to the left and 300,000 nerves going to the right.
Now imagine you had a wire going to your computer with 300,000 little tiny wires inside of it.
Yes.
And you're stretching it and twisting it and bending it and smashing it.
Exactly. As soon as the vertebra distorts, okay, it causes a mechanical traction on the nerve. If the vertebra, ruptures a disc or has a bone spur formation, we'll actually get an entrapment or a pinching of the nerve. Okay, either one of them can cause catastrophic events, not only local pain, okay, but wherever that nerve goes will begin to dysfunction. Okay, so the importance of your spine is self-evident. Without the properly functioning spinal column, the nervous system is going to be compromised. Right. And if the nervous system is compromised, the system cannot work right.
Because the nervous system is the electronics of the body that controls the blood flow, the tissue repair.
Every structure, every function of the human body is controlled by the central nervous system. And everything comes from the head down.
Right.
Okay. As far as maintaining the spine is concerned, we've talked briefly about the traumas. You start traumatizing it early in life, and you just keep right on going all through life. There are certain rules, certain things that you can generally do to help yourself. Now, we talk about proper nutrition. The spinal column has certain nutritional requirements.
Right. Explain some of that. The fluids in there that make things lubricate, the oil.
First thing, that's really so important is just simple hydration of the body. Making sure that you take enough water.
Drink a little bit of water.
Drink a little bit of water. The disc, the cartilaginous pad in between the vertebra is 60% water. And every time we take a step, the vertebrae pound together. And a little bit of that water gets pushed out. And the disc gets drier and thinner and drier and thinner, and that's the reason Grandma shrunk.
Right.
Is because of the
my dad was 6'2", coming out of the Marines, and 5'11" when he died.
5'11" when he died. Adult can lose up to 8 inches of height from prime adulthood to old age.
Wow.
And don't usually lose that much, but as you start thinning out these discs, okay, and these vertebrae settle down on top of one another, you're losing, at some levels, a half an inch at a time.
Now, as it settles down, isn't it doing something to that nerve?
Oh, absolutely it is. It starts impinging upon that nerve and it starts choking it out. The nerve will become inflamed and start deteriorating. And as those nerve cells die, okay, the control of those tissues on the end of that nerve is lost. When it's not connected to the head, okay, the rules of molecules kick in. Right. Randomness and chaos. Okay,
so Grandma thinks she has a stomach problem, really she has a back problem.
She really has a back problem.
Yeah.
The way we sit, the way we sleep are very important. When we were all in 3rd grade, okay, we were all told to sit up straight.
Right.
Okay, but we were never told why. Basically sit up straight because we told you to. Well, what we now know is that when the spine's in its proper position, these nerves are allowed to function at their maximum capacity. When you get out of that posture, when you get into those compromised postures, that slouch postures like that, you increase the deterioration that takes place on the tissues because they're under prolonged abnormal stress. And just like anything else, it will eventually wear out and give away for you. Nutritionally, the metabolism of the bones requires obviously the calcium, the magnesium, the phosphorus, and things like that. Essential fatty acids are required for proper nerve and bone function. Proper protein consumption is necessary for proper health.
Okay. now we have a bowling ball. Explain what you do with this as a chiropractor.
Well,
no holes in the ball, by the way. You don't bowl with it.
No, I don't bowl with this ball.
Okay.
I use this to demonstrate the weight of the average adult head. Okay, depending on the source, depending on the age and the size of the individual, an adult head can weigh somewhere between 8 to 13 pounds.
Okay.
Okay, and so it's like having a bowling ball stuck up on top of 26 movable bones. Okay?
That's quite a Jumanji game or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's a Jumanji game right there.
I got to look at the name of that, but anyway, yeah, it's all got to be stacked right.
It's all got to be stacked right. When the bowling ball's sitting right up on top, okay, well, the stress that it puts on the ligaments and the muscles in the region is minimized. Okay? But when we take that head into the head forward posture, where we spend so much of our time
typing at a computer,
working at a desk, reading a book,
right.
Okay, falling asleep in a sitting position. Okay, it just takes this bowling ball and drops it forward. I do a demonstration when I'm doing lectures back home, and I have a couple of these bowling balls. I'll usually, take a small lady out of the audience and give her the bowling ball and have her hold this bowling ball right up underneath her chin, okay, illustrating the proper position of your head, okay? And then I'll take a large muscular guy and give him a bowling ball, but he has to hold his bowling ball out here like this.
Right.
Okay, and then I'll proceed to continue to lecture to the rest of the group, and pretty soon the crowd will start laughing. And I know why they're laughing. I'll turn around, and the guy with the bowling ball, his hands will be shaking like this, and he'll start shifting it off to the side as he tries to hang on to this bowling ball. Well, our entire life, we have to hold on to the bowling ball. So if we keep it up on top of the spine, okay, it's not quite as difficult a task, okay, than when you hold it out here. And we get out into that head-forward posture in so much of the time.
And I have problems with that myself. I stand and speak so much, my head goes forward, and of course, the muscles are going to say, hold this thing here, which all that muscle pulling on the bone does what to your spine?
Well, it distorts the spine is what it does.
Right.
It puts an extended amount of stress and tension on the ligament structures that are responsible for maintaining proper joint position. Quick physiology lesson, if these are two bones here, it is the responsibility of the muscles to move the bones. But it's the responsibility of the ligaments to bring the bones back.
Sure.
It's an elastic tissue, a spring-loaded hinge. Well, if you take a rubber band, it's an elastic tissue, and when you stretch it out for a little bit and then bring it back, it will return to its normal shape. But if you take that bowling ball, that rubber band, and stretch it over the back of a chair, okay, and leave it there for an extended period of time, when you finally pull that rubber band off, it is not going to return to its normal shape. Yeah. It's going to be stretched out and flaccid. It's going to be weak. Well, it's the same thing. When you hold that bowling ball, that head out in front of you for an 8-hour day, and then go home and sit down and read a book or prop your head up and watch that television set for another 4 or 5 hours, okay, and then go to bed and sleep on your stomach, okay, with your head turned to the side like that for another 8 hours, wake up in the morning with a headache really shouldn't be a surprise.
Right.
Okay, you've just, for days and days and days, you've done nothing but stress out the segments. Okay, and eventually they're going to cause problems.
Well, suppose somebody has done that, like I have most of my life. I have kyphosis, leaning forward. My dad had it real severely, leaning forward. I've seen little old grandmas, they got to watch where they're going.
That's exactly right. The process is very well documented. First the head drops forward, and then the shoulders round off, and then the head gets picked up so you can see where you're going. And then in the late stage, you have your hips pushed out in front of you. Okay, I call it the hanging turtle walk. Yeah. Okay, they got themselves all round out like that, and just like their heads kind of sticking out from underneath the shell. As far as preventing those sorts of things, one of the things that I've been recommending to patients to do for a very long time is a process of passive extension. We spend virtually no time,
stretching it the other way.
Stretching it the other way.
I know what you told me years ago when I first met you was lean over the corner of a bed, let your head hang down, and just arms hang down.
Yeah, and
stretch it the other way.
Spend some time passively extending the other way. Our neutral posture is based on our range of motion. Okay, and in the beginning, our spines are flexible in both directions. We can bend forward and touch our toes, and we can lean backwards and look behind us. But as we spend less and less time leaning backwards, we lose that range.
Right.
And as we lose that range, then our body shifts neutral posture, and it becomes out here.
So this becomes normal.
This becomes normal because the only range that your body knows is upright and forward.
It doesn't remember backwards.
It doesn't remember backwards. And so, you know, if patients would spend time, if individuals would spend time simply hanging backwards over the edge of the bed, you know, they make these exercise balls. You know,
We got one right out there.
Okay, that people can hang over and do some extension work on them. You'll go a long way to pulling those shoulders back up over your hips and your head back over your neck. Matter of fact, I use that hanging off the bed technique at rest areas when I'm traveling long distance and driving. I found that if I get off on the rest areas and hang off the picnic tables, it pulls the ice pick out from in between the shoulder blades and takes a little pressure off my lower back.
And the people walking by think
people walking by give you a lot of strange looks.
That's right.
Okay, but I've also noticed that if after I hang off the bed, you know, or hang off the picnic table, I'll get up and walk around, maybe go use the restroom or something, and I come back and I see other people hanging off the picnic tables the same way. They don't know why they're doing it,
right.
And whether or not they're doing it the proper technique or not is another story, because you certainly can hang too long off the bed.
Right.
You know, you only want to maintain that position for 15 to 30 seconds before you bring your head up and take a little pressure off of it, and then lower yourself back down. You also have to be careful not to hang too far off the bed. One, it will hyperextend or bend your lower back too much, but you can also fall off the bed, and that causes a whole other set of problems.
Well, I travel a lot, and I'm in motels a lot, you know, and so I'll hang over the corner of the bed and watch the news upside down.
Yes, which sometimes is the best way to handle it.
I know. Get the right perspective of the news, because they've already got it backwards.
They've already got a lot of it backwards, so that's a good way to watch the news as well.
Well, good. Well, now, we mentioned just a few minutes left here. What about the hyaluronic acid? What does that do, and does that have to do with fluiding or hydrating? Because I've had several people tell me it's kind of a new discovery, isn't it, hyaluronic acid?
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, we're coming upon all sorts of biochemical components of joint physiology and disc physiology and things like that. Hyaluronic acid, malic acid, monolauric acids. Okay, those all fall into the categories of essential acids that the body needs for maintaining hydration, repairing tissue, and counteracting inflammatory components and things along those lines. Once again, you mentioned that you have to provide the proper raw materials.
Right.
You know, we go back to that protein factory we talked about a little bit earlier. If the factory isn't getting the good raw materials, if it's not getting the essential raw materials, then its product is compromised. You know, I talk about building brick walls. If you don't have any mortar, you can't build a good brick wall.
That's right.
You know, and hyaluronic acid is an essential fatty acid that's required.
Okay.
And you know, and these things need to be supplemented into our diets. You know, unfortunately, we cannot trust our food source anymore. You know,
we're raising food in soil they're only given the nutrients to make it bigger and more saleable.
That's right.
We want to get more
money.
We
want it to look good. You see, that kind of the syndrome of our health too. I mean, it's all a matter of how you look and how you feel right now, as opposed to the long-term essential requirements for good health.
Well, one thought that I think many people don't catch with chiropractic care, which is your specialty, the sooner you catch a problem, the less likely it's going to need, you know. I have to go to the chiropractor frequently because I waited too long. I allowed the problem to become inflamed and scar tissue. But even still, my cost of chiropractic care in a year is probably 1/50th of what health insurance would be for a year.
Yeah. The research is quite clear. We know that people who are under ongoing chiropractic care enjoy a higher quality of life. They take less medications. They require less surgeries. They miss less days from work. Okay, and it's all done at a lower cost. As a matter of fact, recently President Bush, in his new defense budget, is now putting chiropractors on every military base in the United States.
Wow.
Because the Department of Defense found that there is an increased state of military readiness on the bases that have chiropractors available, because those people miss less work.
How much work is lost in the United States because of back problem?
It's the -- cause of absenteeism in the workforce.
Right.
It's the #1 expense for workers' compensation injuries. Okay, you know, billions of dollars a year are lost in productivity.
Yeah.
Okay, because of musculoskeletal injuries, neck pains and lower back pains. You know,
well,
and you know, there's so many things, and you know, we used to consider back problems to be that of older age, but what we're seeing now is that 36% of 17-year-olds have pain in their back today.
Over a third.
Over a third of the 17-year-old population is experiencing back pain today. And if you ask 17-year-olds, if any time in the last 5 years you've experienced an episode of back pain that stopped you from doing what you wanted to do and it didn't tell an adult, it's 70%.
Wow.
You know, the prevalence of back pain in youth is going up. Of course, one of the things that's causing it are the frequent use of backpacks. You know, kids in our schools are carrying 25 to 40-pound backpacks, 25 to 40% of their body weight. They're slinging on their shoulders and walking around with it.
Today's teenagers are really good at working with their thumb and their joystick and the Nintendo games and stuff like that, but the long term?
Oh, the long-term effects of those, what I call Nintendo posture.
Right.
You know, they're into their games, and they're all in here like this, you know,
right.
And they're spending hours and hours like that. And then you bring them to the office and ask them to sit up straight, and this is about as close as they can get to it.
They can't get it.
You know, one of the things I have finally learned is how to encourage them to sit up straight. You know, manual dexterity, the speed at which we can move our fingers, and the accuracy at which we can move our fingers is dependent upon a neutral posture. Okay, and when you sit up straight, your fingers move faster. So I've been able to encourage the Nintendo kids, to sit up straight when they're playing their games.
Well, my wife teaches piano.
Right.
She yells at the kids, sit up straight.
There is a reason why,
Yeah.
Professional musicians, concert pianists, and those sorts, they sit up nice and straight. It's so they have that clear manual dexterity, that precise movement that comes from a neutral posture. You know, as you compromise your posture, the accuracy at which you can move becomes less and less and less.
All right.
Okay. Just like a car that's properly lined up and balanced. You can drive that machine with literally one finger. And you have extra energy available to look at the scenery and talk to your passenger. Okay.
All right, Dr. Tyler, we appreciate you coming all the way from St. Louis down here to talk to my staff and adjust everybody. How many people die of chiropractic care compared to medical care?
The risk of chiropractic adjustment is very small. The most accepted study says that 1 out of every 5.8 million cervical adjustments, can result in a vascular accident, resulting in a stroke or something like that. To put it in perspective, that would require about 25 chiropractors practicing for 40 years, and one of them may once result in damage. Okay, so the risk of chiropractic care is very small.
Compared to medical, where they give you a shot?
Compared to medical, where, according to VAERS, which is the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, about 3 children die a week from vaccinations.
Wow.
2 out of every 1,000 surgeries, doesn't matter what type of surgery, about 2 out of every 1,000 surgeries results in death. Okay, so the risk is very, very small. I know, unfortunately, in the medical community, they are still out there, perpetuating some of the old lies and biasness that was spread through the community. As a matter of fact, what we learned during some recent trials is that back in the 1960s, the American Medical Association set out to contain and eliminate the chiropractic profession.
Right.
The federal courts found them guilty of antitrust activities. And they were the medical community was literally going around the country telling patients that chiropractors were rabid dogs, maiming and mutilating the population, and that we were unscientific cultists, destroying people's health. At the same time, their own research was showing that we were twice as effective at treating musculoskeletal injuries and getting people back to work. On chiropractic behalf, the former president of the American Association of Obstetrics and Gynecology testified that as early as 1945, they knew that women who were getting chiropractic care during their pregnancy were having shorter and easier deliveries and recovering faster postpartum.
Wow.
Because the chiropractic adjustment on a pregnant woman helps the pelvis flare during the birthing process so that the process becomes easier and less impeded. And so it's very, very safe.
I met a lady who said, my dad was a chiropractor. I got adjusted my first day I was born. I was adjusted regularly all my life. And she said when she delivered her first baby, she was in labor, I think she said, for 40 minutes. delivered the baby, and was back up walking around that afternoon.
Yes. Yeah.
Said,
I've heard that story on a number of times.
Yeah, I met the lady. She said,
a matter of fact, I've had the pleasure, of talking about chiropractic care for pregnant women. There's some chiropractic procedures that are preventing breech births.
Wow, making the baby come out head first
allowing the baby to come out head first instead of feet first. When a woman's pelvis is torqued or rotated, it causes a torsion on the uterus, because the uterus is attached to the sacrum and the pelvis.
Right.
And when those structures are misaligned, it pulls on those supporting structures of the uterus and literally closes down the volume of the uterus on the inside. And that will prevent the baby from flipping itself over into a vertex position. And so by adjusting that pelvis, it allows that baby to flip itself down, and we're lessening the number of breech presentations that we're finding with chiropractic care.
So what can a person expect to spend per year for chiropractic care? Of course, if they start early in life and go once every 3 months.
You see, that's
starting
and it's it's really hard to answer that question. I can tell you that in my practice, I treat entire families, moms, dads, and all their kids for $55 a visit. Okay, I charge $30 an adjustment, and I think that's probably a fairly reasonable standard as far as the industry is concerned.
And a doctor visit to go look and say, hey, my kid's got a cold, what's a doctor visit going to cost?
Something around $30 to $50,
right.
Plus what the insurance...
Plus the drugs.
Plus the drugs, exactly. One of the things that we do know, and the reason there is a shift, there are, the recommendations to shift all musculoskeletal injuries, spinal injuries, to chiropractic is well documented. Our own government, the Canadian government, the British government, the Australian government, the RAND Corporation, several think tanks have all documented that if there was a shift, from medical care to chiropractic care for just musculoskeletal conditions, all the other things left aside, but if we just shifted the back pain and the lower back pain, we'd save billions of dollars a year. Yep. The military is going to save $25 million a year alone by shifting their back injuries to chiropractors as opposed to the medical community. The expense that you incur in chiropractic care is, virtually all for the care the doctor renders. As opposed to for every visit to the medical doctor, there's extra costs associated with diagnostic procedures as well as the drug therapy.
Sure.
It's a constant barrage of more and more drugs.
Well, we appreciate it, and I want folks, average person out there, saying, hey, I don't hurt, I feel fine, I'm 21 years old. Yeah. Should they go once every 6 months, once every 3 months?
Yeah, we brush our teeth every day, not because we have pain.
Right.
But because we don't want the pain.
Right.
And every 6 months to a year, we'll still go to the dentist, and he'll take out his probe, and he'll poke on your teeth to make sure that you haven't missed the spot.
Right.
Because if you've got an area of your tooth that's decaying, you want to find it early and fix it earlier because it's an easier process. Well, the same thing is true with your spine. Yes, if you're exercising, if you're doing some things, if you've had a chiropractic evaluation and you've been checked out and you're in pretty good shape and you follow the recommendations that are given to you, well, then a 6-month or a yearly checkup is probably fine. I have families that come in on a weekly basis, primarily because mom and dads have chronic problems that need an adjustment. But they bring their kids in, and I check their kids too.
Right.
Their kids don't get adjusted every visit. We evaluate their spine. If there is something that is fixated, something that's not right, we correct it right away. If the spine's in good shape, we leave it alone.
Good.
We'll move no bones before their time.
Right.
But you don't want to let that distortion get in place and stay there, for an extended period of time. So that's one of the reasons why we adjust children. They're very rewarding in that, we don't make money off of them. Matter of fact, it'd be very difficult to run a pure pediatric chiropractic practice. Wellness care is much cheaper than disease care.
There you go. That's again the problem.
Yeah.
That doesn't pay for the Lexus and the Mercedes and the...
Exactly.
Right.
Once again, on the individual level, I know that the medical community is full of well-meaning people.
Right. Who've been trained wrong.
They've been trained wrong.
Right.
They've just been trained wrong, and
highly trained.
Highly trained. Oh, they're highly degree. Their expertise is phenomenal, considering that they combine for the 3rd, the 5th leading cause of death in the United States.
Right.
It's the nature of what they do.
Yeah, the Al-Qaeda are highly trained.
Al-Qaeda are highly trained also. You know, they unfortunately have just been taught that everything is about a disease.
Right.
You know, and if you go to your medical doctor without a disease, he doesn't know what to do with you.
Yeah.
You can have all kinds of symptoms. I mean, the number of patients who end up at chiropractor's office who have been through medical doctor after medical doctor after medical doctor, and they say, well, I really don't know what's wrong with you, but here, take this drug. I really don't know what's wrong with you. Here, take this drug. Well, you know, after a while, patients get tired of taking more drugs.
Oh, I saw my mom take handfuls of pills toward the end of her life, you know. Each one is undoing the symptoms of something else, you know, and I tried and said, Mom, why don't you throw them all away? Yeah. And I mean, you shouldn't do that right away, you know.
No, and you know, certain drugs you have to be careful, and once again, all knowledge comes from God.
Sure.
I mean, and there, I don't believe there is anything innately evil about the drugs. They're just overused.
Yeah.
You know, I take it back. Some of them might be another story. I mean, there's absolutely no need for you know, thimerosal and mercury and formaldehyde in our vaccinations. Okay, those are things that, you know.
Well, there's a financial need.
Well, yeah, there's a financial
on the pharmaceutical part. They don't want it to go bad.
No, they don't want it to go bad.
Same thing with bread. They take stuff out of the bread so it lasts longer.
Mm-hmm. And so it's worthless to us.
It's worthless, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Doc, we appreciate you coming.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so
much. And keep adjusting those folks.
Thank you. I will.
Right.
Thank you very much.
The Bible says, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. I think proper attitude is extremely important to health also. I'm in favor of chiropractic. I'm in favor of diet and nutrition. I'm in favor of exercise. But I think a good attitude is important. A merry heart. Be cheerful. Quit being a grouch, okay? A lot of health problems are caused because people are a grouch, okay? Proverbs chapter 16 says, pleasant words are as an honeycomb, sweet to the soul and health to the bones. Say something nice. My mom would always say, if you can't say something nice, don't say nothing at all. You know, Bambi, Thumper, you know, Thumper's mommy said that to Thumper in Bambi movie. If you can't say something nice, don't say nothing at all right? Quit being such a grouch. I think attitude is important. Merry heart is good like a medicine. Just learn to be cheerful. If somebody's wronged you, forget them, forgive them. Go on and serve God, okay? I've got people out, there's 1,000 anti-Hovind websites out there. If I dwelt on those, I could become a real bitter person. Forget it. I'm going to go serve the Lord, okay? Leave them alone. Ignore them. Number 4, diet, proper diet. I think this is extremely important. What you eat, what you drink, what you take into your body, that's what your body has to work with to build new tissues, new cells. You're always wearing out stuff. You're always breaking things. You better give it good health. Genesis chapter 1, God told Adam and Eve to eat the fruit, the vegetables, and the seeds. He said, eat the herbs, the fruit, and the seeds. Many diseases are caused because of simple lack of vitamins and minerals. Genesis chapter 9, but the flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, ye shall not eat. There are certain things you should not eat. He said in Leviticus 11, if you eat these things, it's an abomination unto you. He's talking about eating fish without skins and scales. This is eating like catfish, for instance, okay? It doesn't have scales. There were certain fishes and certain animals the Jews were commanded not to eat because it'll make them sick. Now notice God said it's an abomination unto you. There are two kinds of abominations. The word abomination means it makes you sick, okay? Some things, the Bible says it's abomination unto God. It makes God sick to see a man wear a woman's clothes, for instance, Deuteronomy 22:5. But it makes you sick to eat things that God said not to eat. Now, I eat catfish. I don't eat it as much as I like to. I like catfish, okay? But God said certain things will make you sick. Pork, for instance, He said it's an abomination unto you. It's not necessarily, you know, it's bad for you to eat that stuff, okay? Now, in Leviticus 17:1, it talks about things that are an abomination unto the Lord. That's very different than something that's an abomination unto you. Exodus 15, God said, if you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and wilt do that which was right in His sight, and will give ear to His commandments, and keep all His statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I brought upon the Egyptians. I said, I'm the Lord that healeth thee. The first mention of the word disease is right here in Exodus chapter 15. He said, if you'll carefully obey my laws, you won't have any of these diseases. That's a powerful promise. I don't think we carefully obey God's laws. He told us in Genesis chapter 1, eat the fruit, the vegetables, and the seeds. We eat the hamburger, french fries, and Coke. We get sick, die, and go to heaven. God, why didn't you heal me? He says, son, look, I put it in the first chapter. I figured you'd get that far in your family devotions. Why didn't you do what I said? You didn't diligently hearken to my laws. And now here you are in heaven 20 years earlier. I had plans for you down there. You could have led 10,000 more people to the Lord. but now you're up here. Welcome home. We're glad you're here. However, you blew it, son. Okay? I think that's what God's going to say to many of His children when He brings them there. In James chapter 5, it says, if any is sick among you, call for the elders of the church, let them pray over them, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. Now, I'm an independent Baptist, and it's sad you rarely see this in Baptist churches. But I think it's perfectly scriptural to have the elder have the sick people come forward, anoint them with oil, and pray for them. The Bible commands us to do that. And I think some people have gone nuts on this doctrine and think it's always God's will to heal, and it's not always God's will to heal. And so some Baptists have shied away from doing any of it. Well, we don't want to be like some charismatic that anoints everybody with oil and says you're healed. There's a line in the middle where it's right. It's perfectly fine to be anointed with oil. The Bible says in James 5, the prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up, and if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. See, sometimes sinning, disobeying God's word, is tied in directly with health and well-being. It's important that you make sure there's no sin in your life. Deuteronomy 7, keep the commandments. Do what God says. He says then, if you will hearken to these judgments, do carefully what I said, God said, I'll bless you. And I think it's wonderful when God blesses you and gives you length of days and long life. Deuteronomy 7:14, thou shalt be blessed above all people. There shall not be male or female barren among you or among your cattle. And the Lord will take away from thee all sickness, and will put none of the evil diseases of Egypt which thou knowest upon thee. The second mention of disease is again coming out of Egypt. And God said, if you'll carefully obey my laws, you won't get diseases. He told us in Genesis 1, eat the seeds. The seeds contain a vitamin called vitamin B17. People that eat the seeds to fruit don't get cancer. We cover more on that on video number 2 of our seminar series. We talk about the Hunza tribe in Pakistan. Never get cancer. Their favorite food is apricot seeds, vitamin B17. For years, sailors died of diseases like scurvy. They weren't obeying God's law. God said, eat the fruit, the vegetables, and the seed. You don't eat fruit, you get scurvy. Finally, they started taking fruit on board the boats. They called them the limeys. The British sailors were called limeys because they ate so many limes to get rid of the scurvy. I am convinced, and many people are convinced, many diseases are a lack of a vitamin or a mineral found in fruit, vegetables, and seeds. I think an awful lot of health problems could be avoided by eating properly. And we go into video 2, the 2 basic philosophies of medicine. Drug therapy, based on the evolution theory, which says your body's nothing but a bunch of chemicals, you add more chemicals to fix it. Dr. Tyler talked about that. Creation philosophy, though, would say, hey, God designed the body. He designed the food to meet our needs. Nutrition therapy is a totally different way of looking at things. Totally different than drug therapy. The Bible says bread strengthens a man's heart. And it does. Psalm 104, bread strengthens your heart. But they learned years ago if they take out the vitamin E, the lecithin, and the omega-3 fatty acids, the bread will last longer. Of course, people started getting heart attacks and strokes and circulatory problems. Okay, well, that's their problem. The fact is, I'm baking bread, I'm making more money. It all goes back to the love of money, and it's so sad. The Bible has a lot to say about health, and I think George Malcolmus from North Carolina, for instance, was given up to die with terminal diseases. He decided to go back to the Garden of Eden conditions and say, I'm going to eat fruit, vegetables, and seeds, just like God said. He wrote a book called God's Way to Ultimate Health. Many people have taken George Malcolmus's advice, there's his phone number and address on the screen, and have said, man, I feel better. I remember seeing a young man, he came over to our house one time here years ago, probably weighed nearly 300 pounds, and excited about creation, wanted to serve God with his life, but he was just extremely out of shape and in serious health problems. I saw him about a year ago. I went to the church. I didn't recognize him. I mean, he looked incredible. He had slimmed down. He looked really good. I said, who are you? He said, don't you remember me, Brother Hovind? I said, well, yeah, I remember the voice. He told me who he was. I said, what are you doing? He said, I went on George Malcolmus's diet. He said, it's kind of hard. Certain things I like to eat, I can't eat anymore. He said, it's a little tough to follow the diet. But he said, I'll tell you what, I have never felt better or more energized in my life. I've probably had 24 people tell me that over the years. They followed George Malcolmus's advice, and they got healed of their disease, and they feel great. So get a hold of George if you want more information on that. See, your car needs lots of things to keep it running. You need lots of different fluids that have they're designed for specific things. Oil is designed to lubricate parts. It's not designed to cool your engine much like transmission fluid or like radiator fluid would be, antifreeze. Those are designed for something different. Your body needs lots of vitamins and minerals and oils, or something's going to go wrong. If you're deficient in something, something's going to break. Now, there are 3 types of vitamins. People say, I take vitamins. I say, oh, well, what type do you take? And they tell me the brand. I say, no, I don't want to know about the brand. I want to know what kind of vitamin. Is it synthetic? Is it natural? Or is it still alive? It's hard to use the word alive with a vitamin, but basically, I'm going to use the term live. To give you an example here. Suppose I said, we want to fill up the church with people to have, make the videotape look good. We want every chair filled. Okay. So we go to the store and we get all the dummies out of the windows, the mannequins. We dress them up in suits and ties, set them in the pew. They look good, but they're synthetic. They're dummies, okay? They're not alive. They're not going to sing. They're not going to tithe. But we filled the church. Many people fill their digestive tract with synthetic vitamins. It's man's attempt in the laboratory to duplicate what God did in nature. I think that's silly. You're wasting your money. It may stimulate your body to do something, but it's not nourishing your body. The second way to fill the church would be to go to the mortuary and get 500 bodies out of the mortuary, dress them up in suits and ties, set them in the church. Now they're 100% natural, but they're dead. Okay, the processing, you killed them. Okay, I mean they're dead and they look natural, but they're not going to sing. They're just going to raise a stink, and they're not going to tithe. The processing of many vitamins kills them. You can take oranges, squeeze the juice out, put it in a pan, boil all the water away, and end up with the crystals left behind, pack it into capsules, and sell it as 100% natural vitamin C. Well, yeah, but you killed it by the boiling process. If I gave you 2 piles of corn and said, I want you to take this one and cook it and go plant it, and take this one and just go plant it, the one you cooked is not going to grow because you killed it in the cooking process. Many people take natural vitamins that are dead because of the processing. Live are still active ingredients. The enzymes haven't been destroyed by the heat process. Those kind of vitamins cost more, and the average company is not going to do that because people who don't know the difference will buy the cheaper ones thinking they're getting a better deal. And we'll talk more about vitamins and nutrition with one of our nutrition experts coming on here in a minute. Your body needs lots of things, and you can study your body from the deficiency perspective and say, well, wait till you have a problem and then fix it. You don't drive your car that way. You don't wait till it starts sputtering and then say, oh, I got to get gas. Okay? No, you look for it running low and you add it. If you wait till your body gets hangnails and then you say, wow, I need vitamin C. Well, that's true, and that'll fix it. But why don't you just take vitamin C anyway and never get the hangnails? This whole thing started when one of my boys was just 4 or 5 years old, and he had like 20 little tiny warts on his hand. They called them seed warts. I asked a friend of mine in the church who was a nutrition expert. I said, I'm going to go get my son's warts burned off. Who do you recommend? He said, burn them off. He said, why don't you take zinc? I said, well, zinc? He said, yeah, zinc is cheap. $3 for a bottle at the health food store, grind a couple tablets up, mix it in applesauce, feed it to the kid, watch what happens. Within 2 weeks, all the warts were gone. Warts are a zinc deficiency. Now, you can get them burned off, but you're treating the symptom, not the cause. And there are thousands and thousands of little things your body has a problem with that are simply a deficiency of a certain vitamin or mineral or oil. Here's the sequence of events I follow. If I have a problem, I make sure I've got all my vitamins and minerals, make sure I'm getting my nutrients. Then I go to a chiropractor. Is something wrong? Then I check my attitude. Am I a grouch? Am I stressed out about something? Lastly, I would go to the doctor. I would also, during that whole process, pray for God to give me wisdom to do it right and ask God to remove it. Remember 2 Corinthians chapter 12? Paul asked the Lord to remove the thorn in the flesh. He said, I besought the Lord thrice. Lord, please take it away. God said, no, you need this one, Paul. Sometimes you just got to live with it, okay? Don't always say it's God's will to heal, because it may not be. In Luke chapter 22, he said, Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. And then an angel came and strengthened him from heaven. Sometimes you may have to live with a problem, and God will strengthen you to go through it, okay? If you're suffering, I don't want to cause any problems for you. I want to give you some logical sequence things to go through. And if you do what's right and you're still suffering, then say, God, praise God, I'm going to serve you anyway. Now, the Bible says in Proverbs chapter 26, as a bird by wandering and a swallow by flying, so the curse causeless shall not come. If you're cursed with a problem, there's probably a cause for it. And I think the 4 things we've shared today are probably one of the causes. What you should do, check, see if there's a cause, eliminate it if you can. You may be causing your own suffering. If that's not the case, pray for God to take it away if it's His will. If it's not His will, even then, you'd have the elders pray for you, anoint you with oil, have people pray for you, and then live with it. Say, Lord, I'm going to accept it. I'm going to go on serving you anyway. Job went through some horrible suffering and went on serving God. We need to be careful. According to Philippians chapter 3, have no confidence in the flesh. If your body is failing you, you can still serve God. Many people in the Bible did that. As their health failed, they went on and served God anyway. Even if they caused their own problem, God says, look, I'm still going to use you, son, but I wish you'd wise up and start obeying my commandments. Just 3 John chapter 2. I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health. I want you to be healthy. I think God wants you to be healthy. Find something you can do to take care of your health. We hope this has been a blessing to you. We're going to have Jenny Williams come on, an interview we taped earlier, and talk about vitamins and nutrition and minerals and how that's important for health. We're not health experts. We just want to live in this body the rest of our life and want you to also. I want to see you serve God with your life. If you watch our series and you're not a Christian and you live to be 100, that's great, but look, you're going to go to hell. We don't want that. So contact us. Our information will be on the screen. You can contact us. You can contact Jenny if you want more on nutrition. Contact Bill Sardi, who's really a friend of mine and a good health expert. I send people to him just about every day. Say, hey, call Bill Sardi, billsardi.com, S-A-R-D-I, one of the smartest guys I know on nutrition. And we'll get Bill to do some interviews here and Jenny and talk about vitamins and health and minerals. What does the body need and how does it use it? Hope this is a blessing to you. Don't forget the rest of our tapes on creation and evolution, though. You're going to want to see those. What are some things you can do to achieve good health? If a person wants to be healthy, what can they do? Give us some pointers on that, please.
Okay, I think it's wonderful that we can do something to achieve good health, and it is a choice. We can do something to change the way we feel, and the steps are really simple and logical. And basically there are 3. First is to have a good positive attitude and to learn to control and minimize stress, because stress is a major cause of disease and a major factor in illness. And the Bible says it pretty simply, do not be anxious about anything. It's a challenge, but we can do that. Secondly, of course, exercise is critical, adequate exercise and adequate rest along with it, especially the rest for children. Sometimes we expect our children to be healthy and they don't get enough sleep. And then the third is to make sure you do get proper nutrition. In the area of nutrition, the Bible speaks often and specifically about diet. God gave His people in Leviticus some pretty specific, precise, in fact, incredibly precise laws and rules regulating diet and cleanliness. And in Daniel, the 4 Hebrew children refused the king's rich food and had a diet of just vegetables and water, if I remember correctly, and really thrived. And I think God expects us to maintain our health by feeding our bodies appropriately. And to me, it's strange that we spend more time thinking about what we put on our bodies most of the time than what we put in our bodies, and we expect our bodies to function at full performance, sometimes with no more than a coffee and donut or a diet soda for breakfast, and many people skip meals totally and expect to think correctly and to be able to function properly. You wouldn't expect your car to run without gas, and you wouldn't, or proper maintenance with it. And I believe God could have made our bodies that would function forever without any fuel, but He didn't do that. And He set up some specific laws that have cause and effect, the sum of which we call the science of nutrition. And if we ignore those laws, we reap the consequences, usually in illness and poor health, disease, even premature death.
Are there some basic rules we can follow in order to be healthy or understand what our body needs as far as nutrition goes and things like that?
Yes, there are, and you don't have to be an expert to do it either. Again, they're simple, and the first one is to eat foods as natural, or choose foods as close to natural as possible. And we do have a choice when we go grocery shopping. We can either choose God-made foods or man-made foods, and it's pretty easy to tell the difference. The God-made foods were once alive. They either grew in the soil, or they swam in the ocean, or they walked on hoof or flew by wing, and they're usually available in the produce sections or in the meat sections, the dairy section. The man-made food are in boxes and bags throughout the center of the grocery store aisle. And an example would be a baked potato versus a boxed potato. So, if people will think, okay, when I choose my food, is it as natural or as close to natural as it could possibly be? And a second rule of thumb in that area would also be to eat foods as live as possible. Now, you might say, what are live foods? Well, cooked foods are dead foods. And anytime you heat a food to 130 degrees or more, you begin to destroy the enzymes and the vitamins. Vitamins are living, and they are destroyed by heat and oxygen and even cold. And so it's important every nutritionist agrees that you should eat from 1/3 to 2/3, or from 1/2 to 2/3 of your diet in its raw, original form. And then also you should eat foods as whole as possible. A good example of that would be an orange rather than orange juice or reconstituted orange juice. So think natural, live, and whole. Good health is not just a matter of what we get, but it's also a matter of what we don't get. So it's important in choosing our foods to avoid the poisons, not only in food, but in the water and the air too. And in foods, it's important to read labels, and there are probably more than 30,000, maybe 300,000 chemicals in foods, and most of them have not been tested for toxicity. In fact, recent research shows that things we find commonly in food, like monosodium glutamate, nitrates, nitrites, even aspartame, are responsible for causing some pretty serious health effects right now. And in the area of water, we're supposed to drink 1/2 our body weight in ounces of water. In other words, if you weigh 100 pounds, drink 50 ounces of water per day, but it needs to be pure water because there's so many chemicals in water today that to have good health, you have to have the water, but it needs to be good water. And as far as air, there's not a lot you can do to control the air you breathe, but inside your homes you can by using household products that aren't full of chemicals and toxins, and there are ways that you can cut down on that too. And then the third rule in that area is to make sure that we do get the proper, get nutrition in proper amount.
Can taking supplements, vitamin supplements, reduce the incidence of illness in the human body?
It sure can. In fact, the USDA published a study that said if every single person in the United States would just make sure they get the recommended daily allowance, now called the daily values of essential nutrients, we could change our health picture and reduce heart disease by 25%, 50% fewer infant and maternal deaths, 50% reduction in arthritis, 50% avoided or improved cases of diabetes, a 75% reduction in osteoporosis, an 80% reduction in obesity, just to name a few. And again, this is from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And it's an old report. I would guess if they did that study again, that they would have a significant reduction in cancer and some of the other diseases that are plaguing our nation today.
What do we need to do to get 100% of the recommended daily value or the recommended daily allowance? What do we need to do?
According to the food pyramid, the current food pyramid, you'd have to eat 6 to 11 pieces, servings of bread, cereal, rice, pasta, and of course whole grain, because white flour really doesn't have very much nutrition in it. 3 to 5 servings of vegetables, 2 to 4 servings of fruit, 2 to 3 servings of milk, dairy, yogurt, cheese, things like that, and 2 to 3 servings of meat, poultry, fish, dry beans, eggs, or nutrition. Eggs or nuts. I don't know very many people who do that. Do you?
No, you have to eat all day long.
That's right.
Are there certain particular supplements we should be taking to make sure we're getting what our body needs?
First of all would be a multivitamin. It's like buying insurance on your body, that no matter what you eat today, you're going to get all the major nutrients and the micronutrients that your body has to have. It's balancing body chemistry, basically. And I'm not doing these in any order because I'm not sure there is an order, but fiber is important too. We need 25 to 30 grams of fiber a day. Most Americans get 7 to 10. And do you know colon cancer, the #1 cancer killer, is 100% preventable if Americans would just get 25 to 30 grams of fiber in their diet a day. And that's not easy to do without supplementation. In fact, I think it's impossible. Calcium is another one that even the AMA says is critical today because we're facing an epidemic of osteoporosis, which is nothing more than a lifelong calcium deficiency. And calcium is really, really hard to pull from our foods. We really don't assimilate very much of the calcium that's in food today. B vitamins are critical, and we suggest a B complex. Folic acid has been studied recently to prevent birth defects, and every woman of childbearing age should be taking it before they conceive because it's at the time of conception that it's necessary. And also B vitamins prevent a buildup of something called homocysteine in the cells, and this buildup causes cellular damage, which can lead to heart disease and a myriad of other degenerative diseases, and B vitamins keep that from happening. Also, all Americans should be taking antioxidants. That's vitamin C, E, and beta-carotene to prevent free radical damage in the body. And these vitamins, in small amounts, in the regular RDAs or daily values, they prevent vitamin deficiency diseases like scurvy or rickets. But in greater amounts, and sometimes 10 to 100 times greater than the RDA, they act as protectors in the body and therefore reducing the risk of cancer, heart disease, the ravages of aging, and even premature death. Protein, especially soy protein, is a nutrient that's had a lot of research lately concerning the phytochemicals that have been discovered in that product. And if you get a good soy product that contains active phytochemicals and isoflavones, then it does help prevent certain types of cancer, including breast cancer and colon cancer and prostate cancer. It automatically lowers cholesterol about 20% just naturally. It reduces menopausal symptoms. In fact, in Japan, where their diet is where they get about 95 grams of soy a day in their diet, there's not even a word for hot flash in the Japanese language. People who take soy or who have an adequate amount of soy in their diet have stronger bones and better kidney function. And a side benefit is that it stabilizes blood sugar and you have more energy. You just feel better when you're taking it. And I do want to say real quickly, too, that it's important to note that all food supplements are not created equal. And in the area of a soy protein, it must be water washed, not alcohol washed, or the isoflavones are destroyed in processing. So it is important. And in the area of vitamins, too, the same criteria that we placed on food, natural, alive, and whole, should be placed on the vitamin. It needs to be, in my opinion, a natural, whole, live, and that means not heat-processed supplement.
What about over-the-counter drugs? Many people take drugs. Is there a vitamin or a supplement they could take instead for certain problems or symptoms?
There are some natural alternatives to medicine cabinet drugs that most people keep in their medicine cabinet. These are herbal remedies. Herbs are different than vitamins. Vitamins feed and nourish the body. Herbs really act medicinally, and there are a number of them that are safe. Some of them aren't safe, but the ones that I'm going to mention have been proven throughout centuries. In fact, in other countries are used generally in preference to drug treatment. Things like garlic. Garlic is a natural antibiotic and will act not only against bacteria but against a virus, and it'll bring down fever, lower blood pressure, protect against cancer. In fact, it's the #1 food that is being studied by cancer researchers right now that they're through with beta-carotene and vitamin A. And another one would be echinacea. Echinacea is an herb that boosts the immune system and could be used for cold and flu symptoms. It activates the white blood cells and it increases resistance to infection. It really, really makes a difference when someone is coming down with a cold or something. You start taking echinacea immediately, and very often you can avert that illness. Stomach problems, rather than Tums for the tummy, something like peppermint ginger. Peppermint ginger does a great job with nausea or bloating or any type of digestive disorder. Valerian in place of sleeping pills. Valerian is an herb that has been proven to not only help you go to sleep faster, but help you stay asleep and sleep deeper. In fact, you can sleep a shorter period of time and wake up feeling like you've slept double the amount of hours. It's great. Ginkgo biloba for memory loss. Ginkgo, when we get older, we say, well, I just can't think the way I used to. And it's true, we probably can't because we're not getting the same oxygen supply to brain cells. And what ginkgo biloba does is help increase the circulation to the brain, and thereby you do think better and your memory functions better. And a side benefit is that it also helps prevent the risk of stroke. Ginseng boosts energy, and it's a stress adaptogen. And that's another area where it's important to know what you're getting, because there are probably 30 different kinds of ginseng, but only 2 of them really make a difference. And ginseng, sometimes you'll see it listed as a fad herb, but that's probably because they haven't gotten hold of the right kind of ginseng, because it really does make a difference. It stimulates the nervous system too. So if you're tired and you need a boost, ginseng's the thing to head for. Glucosamine is another one that's been well studied and well researched, and it definitely rebuilds joint cartilage. Great product for someone who suffers from joint pain, and not even someone who has arthritis, just someone who runs on a daily basis or who has joint pain in the legs or knees or back or whatever. Glucosamine really helps. Depression is a real problem in our country today. In fact, I think it's one of the #1 drugs is Prozac. And there is an alternative that's natural, that has no side effects and completely safe, and it's called St. John's wort. And it really works. Prostate problems, saw palmetto works better than any prostate drug on the market, better even than surgery to reduce the symptoms associated with that. Women who have PMS, there's a supplement called, an herb called gamma-linolenic acid, which is, we call it GLA for short, and it definitely reduces premenstrual symptoms. It's an anti-inflammatory, and it works rather than taking an anti-inflammatory. It's an omega-3 fatty acid, as is EPA, and both of them really do a good job in that area. So those are just a few of the things that you can use in place of the more commonly used medicine cabinet drugs that we seem to head for.
What about over-the-counter drugs? Many people take drugs. Is there a vitamin or a supplement they could take instead for certain problems or symptoms?
You know, everybody's different, and we're all as different nutritionally as our fingerprints. And nutrients, really, sometimes we think that, you know, we have a headache, we take an aspirin, we have a stomachache, we take Tums, but nutrients don't work that way. They work together like an orchestra rather than a solo. So it does seem that we do have to take more than just one thing. That's why I recommend a multivitamin, multimineral. That gives you a good basis, and that along with a good protein product to make sure, especially soy, generally will give you, the average person who's in good health, that's probably enough, as long as the multi contains an adequate amount of B vitamins and calcium and the antioxidants.
What does your body tell you if you're low in the B vitamins? And there are quite a few different B vitamins, maybe 30 or so. What is the symptoms that you're low in the B vitamins?
Chapped lips is probably a quick, I mean, lots of people have chapped lips and never think about it being a vitamin deficiency, but it is. But things like dizziness or fatigue, irritability, depression, craving sweets can be a B vitamin deficiency. Skin problems, dry, rough skin can be a B vitamin deficiency. Muscle cramps, by the way, can be B vitamin deficiency too. So, I mean, it is hard to kind of pinpoint what it is. Heart palpitations, mood swings can be a B vitamin deficiency because B is a stress vitamin, and it also is an energy vitamin. B is required to produce energy from foods. So any problem in the area of fatigue, you'd look for B also.
All right, and what are the deficiency signs of a person who's low in vitamin C?
If you bruise easily, you have a vitamin C deficiency. An eye problem could be a C deficiency. Bleeding gums or nosebleeds could be a C deficiency.
What one thing would you say is the most important in order to be healthy?
I think the most important thing to remember is that your health is your responsibility, it's not your doctor's. And so many people today depend on their doctor to tell them what to do. And doctors really aren't trained in preventing disease. They're trained to cure it. And yes, when you get sick, go to your doctor. But try to do something on your own you can make a difference in the way you feel today, and you can make a difference in your health by what you do today, even 20 years from now. And I won't quote this exactly because I don't remember the exact quote and couldn't find it when I came, but Dr. Linus Pauling, who's won the Nobel Prize twice, said that you can increase your life expectancy by an average of even up to 24 years by making some changes, essentially nutritional. And even older people can make a difference in not just life expectancy, but the quality of life by eating correctly, by managing stress, by exercising, drinking plenty of water, and getting adequate rest, and taking food supplements.
I understand there's a new product that helps reduce wrinkles. The picture you showed me was incredible of the wrinkle reduction on one side of a man's face after using this for 7 weeks. Tell us about that, please.
Growing out of Shackley's research on antioxidant vitamins, we learned that the skin does not receive any of the antioxidant vitamins that are taken orally. So we put together a team of cosmetic researchers to find a way to hold antioxidant vitamins together stable in a cream where when you put them on your face, they actually delivered the nutrients to your skin cells. Thus the name Infusel, because it actually infuses 7 antioxidant nutrients into the skin cells. And the purpose was to stop the accelerated aging in the skin. And it does do that. It blocks every known cause of accelerated aging. It was a surprise to us, though, during the largest clinical study ever done on a skincare product to find that not only did it block the causes of accelerated aging, but it reversed the visible damage that had been done. In fact, in 2 weeks, we saw a reduction of fine lines. In 4 weeks, with one of the creams, a 421% reduction in wrinkles, and a 154% increase in skin firmness or elasticity. And the picture that you're looking at is a man who put it on, he decided to use it on one half of his face and really test it. And what happened, you can see, is the result of 7 weeks of using it just on one half of his face. And he was so impressed with the results that he went to a professional photographer to record it. We are presenting this line to the American Board of Dermatology in March at their next board meeting, because we're also seeing some remarkable healing effects take place. People with rosacea, people with even skin cancers are seeing some changes that are very beneficial with the introduction of the antioxidant nutrients. It's pretty exciting.
Well, Jenny, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you stopping on your way through Pensacola to visit us, and it's been good to see you again. And I'd like to know if people have questions about nutrition and health. A lot of people, the subject is too complicated for them. It's like there's so much to learn. There's so many vitamins out there, and I don't want to learn it all. I just wanted somebody to tell me what to do. Can people call you and ask you questions? I know you're not the world's expert, but the smartest person I know on the subject. And can people call you and ask questions about their health and what they can do? And what is your phone number, if you would, please?
I may not be able to answer all their questions, but I would certainly welcome the call, and I usually know where to look to find answers if I don't know them.
And what is your number there in Arkansas?
1-800-345-1140.